What is going on, guys, and welcome to Basic JavaScript Projects. In this video, we're going to do a change of background, then we're going to do a create hex, quotes project, pass the message project, counter project, background image slider, calculator, digital clock, and navbar. For all our projects, we're going to have the same basic setup where we're going to have a folder. Then within the folder, there's going to be index.html, then main CSS and script. And for some projects, we're going to need to download, let's say, an image, or we're going to download Font Awesome or some type of logo. But pretty much for starting the project, this is all you're going to need. A folder with 3 files with links to them. So enough of me talking, and let's start building with JavaScript. In this JavaScript project, we're going to create a button. We're going to place this button actually in the middle of our screen, both horizontally and vertically. And once we press the button, you can see that our background color is actually going to be changing. And the way that we're going to do that, we're actually going to set up a array, which is going to hold a colors. In our case, it's going to be only a few colors. However, as we're clicking through the array, the actual colors of the background of the body are going to be changing. Now, before we start working on a project, let's go over our setup. So I have a folder on my desktop called change color. Now I drag this folder, or I open this folder in my text editor, which would be Visual Studio Code. And over here I have 3 files, which would be index.html. Then we'll have a main CSS, and then we have a script.js. Now within the index.html, I have a link to my style sheet, to main CSS, and also to my JavaScript, which would be the script with a source of script.js. And the first thing that I would want in my HTML would be creating a button. Then this button should have a type, and for the type, we're going to say button. Then also we would want to class, because we would want to target this button. So I'm going to say over here class, and the class is going to be color btn. So this is going to be in my name. Now, once we're done with an HTML, the last thing we would want to write is press here. So basically some kind of text that we would want in a button. So over here, I'm going to say change color. So press here to change color. Now you can see over here I have the button, but obviously nothing is happening right now. Now for the styling, we're going to go to the main CSS, and first I would want to place this button in the center. And I'm going to use a CSS flexbox to place the button in the center. So first I'm going to target the body, because the body is going to be the parent element of the button. And I'm going to say over here that min height is going to be 100 view heights over here. Then for the flexbox, we would use a display flex for the body. Then we're going to have a justify content and align items. So justify content is going to place it in the center horizontally. And over here next we would want is align items, and align items is going to place it vertically in the center. So here you can see that if I'm targeting the body, I can use the flex box to display flex, justify content, and this would be horizontally in the center, and align items would be vertically in the center. Now remember that you need to use this min height of 100 view heights for the whole window. So basically what we're saying is no matter the screen size, I would want to have a min height of some kind of percentage of the window. Now it doesn't have to be 100%. I'm just using it because it is easier for me. But let's say over here we can use 50. So what I'm saying is the min height should be always half the screen. And now my button is going to be in the center of the half the screen. So let's go back over here to 100. And once we save this, let's go and actually style the button. So for this, let's use the class that we created before. So this would be color btn. And let's start over here with a simple padding. So let's do padding 0.25 or your REMs. This would be vertically. And then we're going to do 0.5 REMs, which would be horizontally. So this would be our padding over here. Then we're going to have a border, and let's do border of 3 pixels, solid. solid, and then we're going to have hashtag FE. So this is going to be our white border. Now we cannot see anything right now because obviously our background is also white, but we're going to fix that later. Then we would want a border, and let's do border radius. So border radius, and let's do something like 7 pixels, solid, and let's do same thing. Let's do solid, and this is going to be, you know what, no, let's just leave it 7 pixels like it is. We don't need to obviously add because we already worked with the border. So let's do just border radius 7 pixels. Then once we have the border radius, let's do a color for the actual button. So let's do color. This is going to be the font color for the button. And that's going to be again FE. So this is going to be the white one. So now we cannot see anything completely. However, if we're going to do a background, RGBA, and what I'm saying over here with an RGBA is I would want a black background. However, I would want a little bit of opacity over here. So this is not going to be completely black. This is actually going to have a 0.6 opacity. And over here, you can see that we have this opacity. Now, once we have the background, then let's do a font size. So let's do font size. And for the font size, let's do something like 0.85 REMs. And now you can see that our fonts actually got bigger. Now also what we would want is probably to have the text capitalized. So for that, we would want a text transform property. So we're going to say text, and we're going to do a text transform. And we're just going to say over here that this should be capitalized. Now also, you know what, let's right away make the font size actually bigger. Let's do something 1.5 just so it stands out a little bit more. And the last thing, I would want a cursor, and I would want a outline. So for the cursor, if we have cursor pointer, so if I'm going to be go over the button, you can see that the cursor is going to be changing. And also you can see over here, if I click the button, I have this annoying blue outline. So what we're going to do over here, we're going to say outline, and we're going to do none. So we're going to get rid of that outline. And now I can see that I have my button ready to go. Now, before we leave, we would want a color button hover. So as we're hovering, I would want to make the button darker. So I'm going to say over here, background, RGB, and this is going to be without the opacity over here. And I'm going to say 0, 0, 0. So this is going to be black button as I'm hovering. So over here, you can see that when I'm not hovering, it does not have the actual opacity. I'm sorry, it does have the opacity. However, if I'm over here, if I'm hovering over the button, it does not have the opacity anymore. It's actually totally dark. So now let's actually switch to JavaScript and let's write of what kind of functions we would want this button to have. So before we actually can have any kind of functions for the button, first we would need to target two things. We would need to target the button, and we would actually need to target the actual body so we can change the background. So for this, we're going to create a variable, const, and we're just going to say over here, color, and we're going to say color button. So this is going to be a variable, and that's going to be equal to document. So now we're going to select actually the button. We're going to use a query selector for this. And over here, we're going to say that this would be a parentheses. I'm sorry, this would be quotation marks. And over here, we're going to write a class name that we would want. And if we remember, we had color btn. So that's what this was our class. Now we have selected the button. Now after that, what also we would want is to select actual body. So again, we're going to say const, and for this, we're just going to say body BCG. So this would stand for body background. Now again, we're going to use a document. Then we're going to use a query selector. And over here, we're just going to write the parentheses first. Then we'll have a quotation marks. And then we're just going to select the tag name, because we know that with query selector, we can use a CSS selectors. So basically what I'm saying, query selector, select the body. Now, before we can start actually adding the event listener, I also would want to create an array that's going to hold the actual background colors that we're going to use. So for this, we're going to say const, and we're going to call this colors. Now over here, this is going to be equal to, we know how we can create an array. So we'll have a square brackets. Then the first element, we're going to say yellow. So this would be yellow background. Then we're going to say over here that this is going to be red color. then we're going to have a green. And the last one, just to show you that we're not limited to only the name colors, we also can place a hex color. So let's do hashtag, and let's do 3B and 59 and 98. Again, this is really random. It doesn't really matter what hex color you're choosing. Now, once I have these 4 colors, let's actually add the event listener. So once we click the button, actually something happens. Because so far what we have done is just HTML, CSS, and we actually targeted the button. But we haven't actually added any kind of event listener to the button. So for this, we know that we need to actually use whatever variable we already created. So the variable that's targeting the button. Then we're going to have a add event listener. And now what kind of event we would want? So we would want a click event. And over here, we would want click event. And we're going to write that there's going to be a callback function. And we're going to call this function change color. So this is going to be change color. Now, obviously, nothing is going to happen because we haven't created this function yet. So we're going to go over here and we're actually going to write the function. So we have a function. This is going to be a function named change color. Then we're going to have empty parentheses because there's not going to be any parameters. And over here, we're going to say first that let's just look how we can change the background color. So we can, again, use this variable for the body. So we're going to say over here body BCG. Then we're going to say style. So we're selecting style. And then let's do a background color. Now, once we have actually used this style background color, we can set it equal to something. So first, let's say do something like random. Let's say blue. Now, once I have added over here that the background color should be blue, if I'm going to go over here and press the button, you can see that the background color is obviously going to be blue. Now, that's all fine and dandy, but that is not interesting enough for us. First, we would probably want one of the colors that we can have from the array. So for this, we know that we can use a colors array that we have, and we can say over here that let's say the index of the color that we would want would be something like 2. Now we know that this would be 0, this would be 1, and this is going to be 2. So if everything is correct, once we press the button, now the background should be over here green. Now again, this is all fine and nice, but what we would actually want is every time when we press the button, we actually would get a random color from this array. So how we would do that? Well, first, let me just comment this out. So just so you can have this, and let's create over here a random number. So we're going to say let random, and this is going to be equal to what? This is going to be equal to a math random. However, first we would want is math floor, because if you remember that math random was always in between 0 and 0.99999 something. So for this, what we're going to have is math floor. So this is always going to round down to a lower number. Then we'll actually use actual math random. So we're going to create a random number. However, we also would want this math number not to be values between 0 and 0.99999. We would want actual values in between what we have over here in this array. So what we're going to say over here, multiply this by the array name. So this would be colors length, because we know that this always is going to give us value of what we have. So the length would be 4. So every time we would have a random number in between 0 and actually 4. Now, this is never going to be actually 4 because this is always going to be rounded down to the floor. So what we're always going to have is 0, 1, 2, 3. So this is how we're going to get a random number. Now, once we have the random number, this is always going to be within this array. Next, we will do the same thing that we did over here. We're going to say body, BCG. Then we're going to say that we would want to use style. Then we're going to say a background color. And now we're going to say that this background color is going to be equal to what? This is going to be equal to colors. And again, we're going to be selecting the same array. However, instead of actually defining the number over here, we're just going to say random. So every time, whenever we click the button, we're going to get actually a random color that's going to be displayed from this array. So let's test this out. So first we're going to get red, which is going to be over here 1. Then once we click it again, this is actually going to be green, which is going to be over here 2. Then we're going to have this color, whatever it is, this hashtag color. Then after that, again, we're going to go back to green. Then we're going to have a yellow, and you can see that everything is working. So as I'm clicking the button, I'm actually getting a random color from the array that we created before. Now, again, there's going to be times when you're pressing and the same color comes back on because this is a random number. But in general, we completed our project, and now we have the button that can get random colors from the array, and we can change the background of the body using these colors. In this project, we're going to create a container that's going to include a heading, and in the heading, there's going to be a hex number, which is going to refer to the background color that is for the body right now. And over here, this would be a button that's actually going to be changing the hex color. So every time we're going to press a button, there's going to be new hex color for the background of the body. And over here, this background color code, the hex code, is actually going to be displayed over here. So as we're clicking, you can see that color is going to be changing, and we're going to see over here what color code is over here for this hex color. Now, before we start coding away, let's again look at our setup. So in desktop, I'm going to have a folder of hex color. Then in the actual code editor, you can see that I have in the folder index.html that has links to main CSS, and I have main CSS and script.js over here files, and now we can start actually working on them. So let me just hide the sidebar again, and once we do that, then let's start with HTML. And in the HTML, for the actual heading and for the button, we're going to create a container. So we're going to start over here in HTML by creating a container. Now we're going to say over here container, and since we're using Emmet, I can just write over here, and it's going to know that this is going to be div with a class of container. Now we're here within the container. What we would want is actually heading 2, and within the heading 2, we're going to have a class of hex color. So this is going to be our class. And then over here as a text, we're going to have is this is a hex. This is, or just this hex color code. And we're going to write over here code, and we're going to say is. Then we're going to have a colon. Then after that, we would want a span with a class of text where we're actually going to place our numbers. So let's say over here, this is going to be a span, and the span is going to have a class, and the class is going to be hex. So this is going to be our class, and we're just going to have a hex. Now, once we are done with a heading, and this would be the span where the actual number is going to appear, what would be the hex color number, then we would again want a button. So again, for the button, we're going to have a type button, and over here we would want a class. So for the class, again, we would say hex btn. So this is going to be our class. And let's write again over here that this is going to be press here to change color. Over here, again, we're going to have some text within our button. Now, once we are done with our HTML, now let's go to our main CSS. Now in the main CSS, we're going to start again by placing this container in the center. And since we're going to be using this a lot, I'm not going to go again in a great detail because we covered this in the first project with actually changing the colors. So I don't want to repeat myself too much, but we're going to create again body as the height of 100 view heights. And then we're going to use a flexbox to place the actual whole container in the center. So I'm going to say over here body, then we're going to have a min height. So this is going to be a min height, and again we're going to have 100 view heights. Then we're going to have a display flex for the whole body. Again, align items. I'm going to say center. This is going to place it vertically in the center, and justify content is going to place it in a center horizontally. Now, once we have done this, let's do a container, and actually let's place text align center for the whole container. So as we know, we have a class of container. So what we can say over here, text align and center. So now we have the text that is actually aligned in the center. Now after that, we will have a class of hex color. So basically whatever the number is going to be over here. And for this, we're going to say that this should be actually capitalized. Now, actually the hex color over here, what I'm talking about is this one. We'll have the actual hex. That's going to be the numbers. So for the hex color, we're going to use the class that we created. And we're just going to say over here, text transform, and we're going to say capitalize over here. So once I save this, you can see over here that I have my hex color that's going to be capitalized. Now, like I said, we also would want to target the hex, which would be our numbers over here. And we would just want to give it a bigger font. So again, we're going to select the class of hex, which would be over here, this guy, right? So this span over here, and we would want a bigger size. So we're going to say over here, font size, and let's do something like 3 REMs. Now, obviously you cannot see anything because we haven't added yet the numbers. Now, once we're done with our heading, let's do a button. Again, we're going to say hex btn. This should be our class name for the button. And over here, let's start with a color. That's going to be the text color. And that's going to be hashtag F15025. So this is going to be this orange color. Now, obviously, I can see that I made a mistake. This is hexed button. And if I change it, now I'm actually targeting the right class. Now, let's start over here again with a border. So border, 3 pixels, solid. And let's do again the same color. So we're going to have the orange color of F105 and then 025. Now after that, let's do a border radius, and let's say that the border radius is going to be like 7 pixels over here. So these are going to be the rounded corners. Now once we have the border radius, let's do again a background, and again we're going to have a black background with an opacity. So this is going to be 0, 0, 0, and 0.6. So the black color with an opacity. And let's do a font size of 1.6 REM. So font size 1.6 REMs over here. So this would be a bigger font size. Now, once we have the font size, let's do a padding. And again, we're going to have a 0.25 REMs and 0.5 REMs. So these should be 2 font sizes. So now we have over here a padding. Now, once we have the padding, let's do again cursor, pointer over here. And then we'll have this annoying outline that we would want to get rid of. You see over here, this blue color. So let's write over here the outline. And we're going to say none over here as we are clicking. And let's do again text transform capitalize. So we have a couple of options. We can just copy and paste this line, or we can just write a rule over here, write our property, and then give it a value of capitalize. Now, last thing, let's do a hover. Let's do the same thing. So we'll have a hex button, hover, and for this, let's do a background, and let's do again RGB, and again, this is going to be 0, 0, 0. So as we're hovering, this is going to be totally black, and if we're not hovering, this is going to have the opacity. Now, this should be it for the HTML and CSS. Now let's go to JavaScript, and now let's actually start working with our code. Now here you can see that with a hex color, the way we create a hex color, we have a hashtag, and then we have 6 values over here. And the values that we can have is between 0 and 9. And then for the values above 9, we have A, B, C, D, E, F. So basically A would be value of 10, then B would be 11, and so on and so forth. So the way we create a hex color, we just pick one of the values that we have between, let's say 0 and 9, or between A and F, and we just place 6 of them over here in a row. So the way we were going to do it, first we're going to create an array that has all these numbers, and then every time when we're going to click a button, we're going to generate this by, again, using the random number. We're going to use this as a random colors that we're creating from these values, and then we're going to add this background color to our body. So again, first things first, let's create an array that's going to contain all the possibilities that we have for these hex. So I'm going to say over here hex numbers. This is going to be my array, and we're going to start, like I said, with the numbers. We can have 0, then we have a 1, and as you can see that all I'm doing is just placing it as a value. Then this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then once we have our 9 values over here, well, I'm sorry, this would be actually 10 values because we start with 0. But once we have them, let's do right now the actual values with the letters. So first would be A, then we're going to have a B, then we're going to have over here, this would be C, so comma C, then we'll have after that D and E and F. So D, E, and the last one over here is going to be F. Now once we have these values, these are going to be our possibilities. Now let's actually target what we have for the button and for this hex. Remember where we're going to be placing the values. And also obviously we need to target the body. So let's start with a button. So let's say over here const hex btn, and this is going to be equal to document, and again we're going to use a query selector, and for the query selector we're going to say that this is going to be a hex btn, because we remember that we can use classes over here in our query selector. Now once we have selected the button, now let's do the actual background of the body, or in general let's select the body first. So again we're going to have a const, this is going to be a body bcg, again we're going to name this like this. Then this is again being a document query selector, and for this again we're going to select the whole body. So you can see over here I don't need to use any kind of class name or anything, I can just use the element tag name. Then last one is, remember over here we had this span that had a class, and the class was hex. So we'd want to target this also, because that's where we're going to place our actual value of the code over here. So if the color is going to be this, we would want to place it over here. So once we change the color, we can also see over here the actual value of that color. So let's go back over here to our script. This is where we're working, and let's select this hex. So again, well, I'm going to name the variable the same name, and we're going to do a document. Then we're going to have a query selector, and over here we're going to say that this is going to be a parentheses, then quotation marks, and over here class of hex. So now we have done the first part. We have selected all the elements that we're going to be working with. Now after we have selected them, now for the button we would want to add a click event listener. So we're going to say over here hex button, then we're going to say add event listener. Now what type of event? This is going to be click event. Now once I have the click event, the next I would want what would be the actual callback function. Now the callback function is going to be get hex. Now obviously again we haven't created the function, so now let's go ahead and let's create a function. So for this I'm going to say get hex. This is going to be the name because obviously they need to match over here, and I'm going to say this is going to be empty parentheses because there's going to be no parameters. Then first what I would want is create a variable that's going to actually hold my hex color. So I'm going to say let, and let's do over here hex color. So this is going to be the name of my variable. Now first it's just going to have a quotation marks and hashtag over here. That's all, nothing else and nothing more. So this is going to be my hex color that eventually I'm going to use. Now after that, what I would want is I would want to generate this 6 numbers over here somehow. I would want to generate this either number, or this would be actually a B, C, D, E, F value, right? But I would want to generate from these possible available from 0 to 9 and A to F. And also I know that I need 6 of them. So basically I would need to create a for loop that picks these values from this array 6 times. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to create a for loop, like I said. So first we're going to have a for loop, and we know that we need to start by saying that I should be, let's say in our case, this is going to start with a 0. Then we're going to say that this is going to do it 6 times. So before it actually gets to 6, we need to say that I needs to stop when it is less than 6. So now, then we know that it's going to run 6 times. And then we're going to say that we're going to increment each time by 1. So I plus plus. Now over here, what we would want each time when we're running this for loop. Then again, we're going to create another variable, and we're going to say let random. And again, this is going to be equal to generating random number. So we already know that first we would want to create math floor. Then we're going to say math random. So this is going to be the random number that we're generating. And again, the same way. If we know that we would want whatever value out of here, this array each time, we know that we would need to multiply this random number by hex numbers, the name of our array, and length. And this way, all these 6 times, we're going to get a random number that is going to be less than a length, because even though we're multiplying by a length, we're also applying math floor. So this is always going to be, if the length is, let's say, going to be over here 16 or 17, this is always going to be less, because what we're saying is length, but we're using also math floor. So this way we're always going to generate whatever number of these possible values. Now once we have done this, then what we would do with this number, whatever we're generating, well, what we would want is we would want to add this value to this hex color over here. So what I'm going to say over here is hex color, and I'm just going to say plus equals, and over here we're going to say hex, and let's do numbers over here, hex numbers, and we're going to say over here random. So what I'm saying over here is add to this hex color something that you're picking from this hex number with this random variable over here. So we have a random variable, we're getting a random number. Then we're placing this random number in the hex numbers, because we know that we have an array, and we're placing this number as a index, and whatever we're getting back, we're just adding over here to this hashtag. So if we run this 6 times, we should every time have random number like this. Now, before we actually change anything, let's do a console log, just so we can see that this is actually working. So let's do console log every time, and let's do hex color over here like this. So now let me save this. We're going to go back to our document where we're working. I'm going to open a Google Developer Tools, and let's check it out what we have in a console. So for now, you can see that my console is empty. But if I press it over here, you can see that first we got a number, and that was actually 4. Now, how did we get 4? Well, in general, let's do also like this. Let's maybe show you how we can get a random number, and then let's do a hex color. So again, let's do console log, and let's do random, just so you can see how we're generating these numbers. So as you can see over here, because we have 0 to 9 actual numbers, if we're getting 1 as a random number, it also reflects as a value from our index from our array is also going to be 1. However, if we're going to go down all the way to 14, which would be our random number, you can see that now we're getting E, because as it is going through over here, you can see that number 14 is going to be actually E. And then again, we're going to go back to 4 over here, and this should be our value. Now, since we're generating this number, now we can use actually this number as a background for our body. So let's get rid of this console log. So let me just comment out these console logs, and we can click, we can actually close the developer tools. And over here, let's go back over here to our body. So for the body, we're going to say body BCG. And for this, we're going to say style, and again, background color. And what would be this background color? Well, this background color now is going to be equal to this hex color that we're getting over here. Now, what we would want is actually get out of this loop because we would want to change only the background color as we are done with the for loop. So when we're done with the for loop, now we would want to use this hex color to change the background. So I'm going to say over here hex color. So this would be a for the background. And also remember we had this value of hex. So we would want to place this hex value. So we're going to say hex inner HTML, and this is also going to be hex color. So that's all we have to do. So now when I'm going to save this, there's going to be change in my background, and I'm also going to get this value right away. So you can see that we had two numbers of FF, then we had 30, and then we had 5e. And as I'm pressing, you can see that how we're generating this random number out of this array, and then we're placing this random number back in over here in the actual array and getting the value. And then once we have this, you can see that as I'm pressing over here, we are getting our hex color, which we're using to change the background of the body and also to display over here in our span. In this project, we're going to create a quote generator. So we're going to have a quotes by famous people. Now, obviously, this is just going to be an example, but in general, we're going to have a quote. And then once we press the button, then we're going to be able to see what is the text of the quote. And over here, this would be the person who is actually saying that quote. Before we start coding, let's look at our setup. So again, in the desktop, I have the folder quotes that is in my text editor. And again, I have index.html, main CSS, and script.js. And over here, I'm linking to main CSS and also script to script.js. Now, in the script.js, in this case, I already have this quotes array over here with a quotes from the famous people, but I'm going to talk more about this once we actually get to the using the JavaScript. So we're going to go back to index.html, and we're going to start over here by creating a container div with a class of container over here that we're going to use for our quotes. Over here, this is going to be our document. Now within the container, we would want to start by creating a heading 2 over here. And within the heading 2, we're going to say that this is going to be quotes by famous people over here. Now, once I have my heading over here, next, what I would want is actually have a button that's going to display these quotes. So again, as always, we're going to have a button. Then for the button type, we're just going to say that this is going to be a button. Then we're going to have an ID. And for the ID, in this case, let's use something else. Let's say that this is going to be quote btn. Now, if you remember in the previous projects, we used class. So just for change, let's use the actual ID. Now, within the button, let's write again that we would want press to display a quote. So this is going to be our text within the button. And then we would want to create an element of block quote. And within this block quote, we would want a heading 2. And this heading 2 is actually going to have an ID of quote. And the text over here inside it as well is going to be quote. And as you can see over here, the emmet suggests right away what would be the abbreviation. So we have heading 2 with an ID of quote. Then we have actual text. Once I press the tab over here, this is what I get. Heading 2, ID of quote, and the actual text of quote. Now last but not least, we're going to create a heading 3 that's going to be a quote author. So again, we're going to do the same thing. Hashtag, this is going to be for the ID. Then we're going to say quote author. This is going to be our ID. And then we're going to have a text. This is going to have a author of the quote over here. And again, you can see right away how Emmet is suggesting what we're going to get. Now, once we're done with our HTML, let's go ahead and let's style it in the CSS. As always, let's place the container in the center. So let's start over here by targeting the body, saying the min height is going to be 100 view height. Then we're going to have a display of flex. Then we're going to align the items in the center vertically. So align item center. and justify content, also we're going to do center. So this is just for aligning our container in the center. Now let's add some additional things. First, let's do a background for the body. Let's say that this is going to be hashtag FF, and then we're going to say A8. So this is going to be our background. Then also we would want the actual color for the whole body, and we're going to say hashtag 333. So this is going to be the color of our text. Then let's do font family. Let's do Calibri over here, and let's do sans serif. So do sans serif. Then let's do a font weight. So font weight, and let's do 400 over here. Now once we have the setup for the body, let's deal with our container next. So again, we have the div with a class of container. So let's target the container. Let's do text align center. Then we'll have a padding all around is going to be 2 rems. So 2 rem. Now, once we have the padding, let's do a border radius over here. So border and radius. Now this is going to be, let's say, 5 pixels over here. Now after that, let's do a background color. So for a background color, let's use a white one. So let's say hashtag FFF over here. So this is going to be our container. Now with a display flex, with a flex box, what we can do is we can use the flex properties to get a width for our container. So no matter what of the screen size, it's always going to stay the same. So for this, we're going to say flex 0, 0, and over here we're going to use percentage. Now again, we can use whatever percentage we would want, but I'm going to use 80%. So no matter what of the screen size, this box over here is always going to be 80% over here like this. Now obviously, if I would change this to 50, it's going to be a 50. Now once we are done with a container, let's start working with a quote button. So in this case, we had an ID. So we had quote btn, quote button. And for this, we're going to say first that border is going to be none for our quote button. So you can see over here, our border disappeared. Then we're going to have a color. So let's say over here that this should be a color. And let's do a white one. So again, hashtag FFF, white one. So now obviously the text disappeared. So for this, we would want a background. So let's do background, and this is going to be the same that we were using over here. Or you know what? No, let's do it a little bit different. Let's say D, and then we'll have 8, 9, and 156 over here. So this is going to be a color for the button. And let's do a font size. Let's say 1.3 rems. So this is going to be our font size. And let's do a padding. Our usual padding of 0.25 rems and 0.5 rems. So this is going to be our padding. Now we can also, let's do a border radius. So border radius. And again, let's do 7 pixels, something like this. Now, once we have everything over here, I think we're ready to go and actually have the cursor. Let's do cursor pointer. Now after that, what we would want is, as we're hovering the button, what should happen? So let's do a quote btn and hover. Now as we're hovering, again, let's change it the color. So we're going to have a color, and we're just going to have a color of hashtag FFD000 or like this. So this is as I'm hovering. You can see that the color is actually changing of the text. Now, last but not least, we're actually going to have a block quote over here. And for the block quote, we're going to have a background. Now, what we would want, we would say that this is going to be a block quote. For the block quote, we're going to have a background. And the background is going to be hashtag F9 over here. So this is going to be, you see over here, this is going to be our black one. Then we're going to do a border left. And for the border left, we're going to say 10 pixels solid And let's again have a hashtag FCDBBF over here. So this is going to be over here, our border on the left. And let's do a little bit of margin. Let's say margin is going to be 1.5 REMs. And let's just leave it like it is, like that. So basically there's going to be margin all around. And let's do the same thing with the padding. Let's say padding is going to be 0.5 REMs all around. So this is what we're going to get as a block quote. And the last but not least is going to be quote author. So let's say over here that this is going to be a quote author. So hashtag, because this is going to be our ID, quote author. And for this, we're going to say color. And again, let's use the same thing over here, what we had. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. And this is what's going to be our color over here for the quote. Now we can also maybe do a text transform over here for capitalize. So let's try it over here for the whole body. Let's just say that this is going to be text transform, and let's do capitalize. So all of them over here, you can see that are going to be capitalized apart from the button over here. But we can just leave the button the way it is, and we can just work with our JavaScript right now. So like I said, I already placed over here this array that contains our quotes. Now, obviously, you don't need to do it this way. You have two options. You can either go ahead and download the zip file, where we're going to have this array right away within your script.js, or just for the sake of working right now as we're building everything, you can just say that this is going to be, let's say, simple quotes. So this would be my simple array. And over here, we can just say like this. We can say that this is going to be, first of all, array. So we need this square brackets over here. Now, once we actually have a square brackets, what we would want is we would want to place the objects over here. So the first element of array is going to be object, and we can just say name, and let's say the name is going to be author number one over here. And then we're going to say the same thing, that this is going to be quote number one. So over here, this would be the quote, and we're going to say over here quote number one. Now again, you have two options. You can either download what we had over here in script.js, or you can make your own, basically by placing the objects the same way in the array and just change over here these values. So this would be author number two and quote number two. Now again, since I have already quotes done, I'm going to be using this array that I already created before. So I'm just going to, let's say, comment this out right now, just so you can see that you have this option, but we're going to be working with these quotes. So let me just make a little bit of room, and let's go back over here, and let's actually start, first of all, targeting what we would want. Now, what we would want to target first. So first, we're going to target a button. So I'm going to say over here, quote btn. This is going to be the name of my variable. Then we're going to have document, and again, we're going to use a query selector. Then we're going to have an ID. So now we know that we're targeting ID, and the ID name was quote btn. This was our ID. Now, once we have selected the button, we also would want select over here this whatever quote and also the author. So if you remember, we had over here the ID of quote author and the actual quote. So we can go back over here and we can also select them. So let's do const, and this should be a quote author. This is going to be the name of our variable. Again, we're going to use a document query selector. Then what we would want is to select the actual author. So ID and quote author. And the last one as our selection is going to be the actual quote. So I'm going to say const quote over here. And this is going to be equal to document query selector. And over here, this would be parentheses and again, and quotation marks, hashtag quote. This would be the name of our ID. So first things first, we need to target these IDs so we can actually access them. Now, once we have accessed them, now we would want to place a event listener to our button. So here I'm going to say that this is going to be quote btn. I'm going to say add event listener. Again, this is going to be click event. And over here, we would need to write a function. So I'm going to say that this is going to be display quote. So this is going to be our function. Now, obviously, we need to create the same function. So let's say display quote, and let's create a function. So the function is going to be display quote. And over here, we have empty parentheses. So no parameters, no arguments. But within the function body, what we're going to write. And as always, what we would want is we would want a random number that's going to be starting from the 0 index all the way to possibility to a last index. So we would want a random number that's not less than the lowest index over here and not bigger than the highest index from the array. Because what we're going to do is every time we press the button, we're going to again generate the number, random number from the array that's going to select this index, let's say 1, and then we're going to retrieve this name and then quote from each of the random numbers that we're getting. So let's start again by creating a random number. So this should be number. And since we already have done this a few times, we already know that we start with math floor. Then we're going to have a math random. Or here, this is going to be math random. So we're generating again random number. However, since we want to actually have the math number that is within the boundaries of our array, what we would need is just have a quotes, the name of our array, and then we're going to have a length. So this way, our number is never going to exceed the biggest index of our array, or it's not going to go lower than our lowest number in our array. So once we have this, let's just again look at what we're getting. So let's do a console log and let's log out the number. So let's do a number over here. And once we save it, now I have 5 quotes over here. So my length is going to be 5. So let's do over here. Let's do the actual developer tools and let's do console. Now I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And then let's just see what we have. So as I'm pressing the button, you can see I'm getting 4. Then I'm getting twice 4, 3 times 4. Then I'm getting 2, 2 times 4. Then again, I'm getting 4, 3, 2, again 2, 1 over here. And I can just keep going and going and going and going. Now, what's happening over here is I'm always going to get whatever value of a array that I'm actually working with. So let's go ahead over here and once we have the number, let's actually use this number. So first things first, let's actually go ahead over here and let's delete this console. And once we have deleted the console log, we can also close this over here, our actual developer tools. So let's close this out. And now what we would want is every time I press and I get this random number, I would want to get a name and a quote and actually place them. One is going to be placed within the quote and the other one is going to be author of the quote. So the way we do that, we know that we have selected the quote author and the actual quote. So let's start with quote author. We know that we have selected quote author. So what we're saying is inner HTML of this quote author is going to be quotes, which is going to be our array. Then we're going to get our random number, which is going to give us a random index. And from this random index, we're going to get a name. So this is going to be our name. And obviously the same way we're going to do over here with our quotes actual value. So we have another one, which is actual quote. So we can delete this quote author. This is just going to be quote. Then we're selecting again quotes number. But then over here, instead of name, we're getting a quote. So this is going to be our value pair. So what we're getting is quote, and over here we have a name. So if I'm going to display this, we have get busy living or get busy dying. This would be Stephen King. Then we have over here Abraham Lincoln. Then again, we're going to have a John F. Kennedy. Then again, Abraham Lincoln, Stephen King, Leo, and again, we're just keep on going. So basically what we're getting is just random quotes, what we got over here. So I started Stephen King, then John F. Kennedy, Abraham, Leonard, and Leo Tolstoy. So this is how we can generate random quotes using a JavaScript and actually placing them within our document. In this JavaScript project, we're gonna create a input where we're gonna pass the message. So here you can see that we have our input, and if we're gonna write hello world, what's gonna happen is once we click the button, or here you can see that we have last message delivered. So here this would be the hello world that we just wrote over here in our input box. However, if we're trying to pass an empty message, so as you can see over here, I'm not gonna write anything and I'm just gonna press to send. I'm gonna have a alert box that's gonna say, please enter a valid value. Now, before we start coding away, again, our usual setup would be there's a folder somewhere. Again, in my case, this is gonna be in the desktop just so it's easier for me to find. And then over here, we're gonna have our text editor, and the folder is gonna be in our text editor. And within the folder, we're gonna have index.html that's gonna have links to the main CSS and script.js. And for now, both of these files are gonna be empty. And the first thing that we want in the index.html, we're gonna create a div that's gonna have a class of container. Now within the container, we're gonna have a heading 1, and for the heading 1, we're gonna have a text of message you would like to send over here. Then we'll press the tab, and then we have a heading 1. After that, we're gonna have a input, and for the input, we're gonna have a type of text. So we're gonna have an input type is gonna be text. Then it's also gonna have a name. So we're going to say over here that this is going to be the name, and the name is going to be message, and we're going to call this message in. Now also we're going to create an ID, and for the ID we're going to say that this ID is going to be message in. So this is going to be the ID of our input. Then once we have our input, we're going to have a button. Now for the button, as always, we're going to have a type, and for this type we're going to say button. Then also we're going to have an ID for the button. So let's do an ID, and let's say send btn. So this is going to be our send button. Now we're going to say for the text, press to send. So this is going to be the text within our button. So you see over here now we have our button. Then after that, we would want a heading 1, which is going to say last message delivered. So we're going to go back over here, and we're going to say last message delivered. Over here, this is going to be for the heading. Now after the heading, we're going to have another heading 1. However, this heading 1 is going to have an ID of message out, and it's not going to have any text in yet, because this heading 1 is going to be used whenever we're delivering actually the message. So this is going to be it for a index.html. Now let's go to main CSS and start styling. As always, what I would want is I would want to place this container in the center. So first, let's give it a min height of 100 view heights for our body. Then let's do a display flex. And after display flex, let's do align items center. Let's place it vertically. And justify content, let's do center to place it horizontally. So over here, our container is in the center. Let's give it a background of hashtag 8AD and 5E9 over here. This is going to be the background, our body. After that, let's give it a color. So hashtag 333 over here. This is going to be the color of our fonts. Again, let's do font family. We'll do a Calibri. And let's also do a sans serif over here. So let's do Calibri and sans serif. Now, once we have the font family, let's do font weight also. So font weight, and let's do 400. Once we have our body, let's work with a container. So the next one is going to be the container. We know that we have a class of container. So we're selecting the container, and let's do text align center over here. So first, Let's put everything in the center. Then we're going to give it a padding, and the padding we're going to have is going to be 2 REMs over here. This is going to be our padding. Also, we would want a border radius. So we would want the rounded edges. So border radius, and let's say something like 7 pixels over here. Also, we would want a background color. So let's do a background for our container, and let's give it a white one. So over here, you can see that this would be our container. Now also, we would want is a flex. And basically what we're saying is we would want always to have this container a certain type of width. And we're going to use 0, 0, and 80% over here. So no matter the screen size, this container is always going to be over here, this 80%. Then after that, let's do a button. So let's select a button. So since we have one button, we can just select it as a button. And let's add a few things over here. First of all, let's do display, and let's do display block. So here you can see that this starts right now on a new line. After that, let's say that this would have a font size, 2 REMs over here. So this is going to be our button. Now after that, let's also have a margin. So let's do margin, 1 REM, top, bottom, and let's do auto for left and right. So what I'm saying is top and bottom have 1 REMs, and left and right, just place it in auto. So what I want is for this button to be in the center. Now also I could do a padding. So not page break, padding. And for the padding, we're going to say 0.5 REMs and 1 REM. So again, top, bottom, and this would be 1 REM left and right. Now let's do a color. So what would be the color? So we're going to start with a color of hashtag FFF. So this is going to be our white color. Let's give it a background. And for the background, we're going to say hashtag 6cc3d8 over here. So this is going to be our background. And let's do border radius. And for the border radius, let's do something like 8 pixels. And once we have the border radius, then we're going to have actual border. And let's say the border is going to be none. So we're going to get rid of the border altogether. However, we're going to have a border radius. Once we're done with a button, let's create a button hover. So as we're hovering, so we'll have a button hover over here. So for the button hover, we're going to say opacity, and let's give it opacity 0.8. So as we're hovering, the opacity is going to go down. And then we're also going to have a cursor pointer. So only as we're hovering over the button, we're going to have this cursor displaying. Now let's work over here with our input, over here, this one. So for this input, what we're going to say is that there's going to be an input. And for the input, we're going to say square brackets. And type, we're going to say text over here, text. Now for this type of text, we would want first a padding, 0.5 REMs over here. Then we're going to have a margin. All around is going to be 1 REMs. So this is going to be our input. Then we're going to have over here a border radius. So border radius, and this is going to be 5 pixels. After that, we would want a font size, and for the font size, we're going to say 1.5 REMs. And then we're going to have also a border, and we're going to say border, and border is going to be 3 pixels solid. So we're going to say border, and this is going to be 3 pixels solid, and this is going to be hashtag 88D5E9 over here. So this is going to be our border. So now once we have the border. However, again, what I would want is I would want to get rid of this outline. You see this by default outline. So I'm going to say over here, outline none. So once I focus over here in my input box, you can see that I don't have any more this annoying outline. Now also, let's add a box shadow as we're focusing in this input box. So here we're going to say input. Then we're going to say type over here, type, and over here text. Now for the type of text, we're going to say box. and we're going to say shadow. And for this, we're going to say 0, 0, 10 pixels, and then we would want the color. So what we're saying is what would be the blur, what would be the actual, well, horizontal, vertical, and over here for this one, we're going to say hashtag 88 and D5E9 over here. So this is going to be our box shadow. As we're focused, you can see over here that we're getting a box shadow. Now, after that, what we would want is actually, oh, you know what? I messed it up over here. See over here, we need a focus. So not only we're selecting, but only as we're focusing, you can see that we're getting this box shadow. Now, last but not least, we would want a message out. And we would want to add some styles to message out. So then we're going to have a ID of message out over here. And for this, we're going to say first margin is going to be 0.5 REMs and 0 left and right. So only top and bottom. And then also we would want a color. So this would be a different color. Since we're going to use the same color, I can just copy and paste the color over here. So copy and paste. And now let's go to JavaScript and let's actually construct our logic. Now you can see that we have empty script.js. So let's start first by targeting everything. So first we're going to have a button. So let's call this send btn. This is going to be our variable document. Then we're going to have a query selector. So query selector. And then over here, we're going to say it's going to be parentheses. Then we'll have a quotation marks. And since we have now ID, we're going to say send btn. So this is going to be send button. Then we're going to have a message in and message out. So we're going to call this message in. And this is going to be document query selector again. So we're going to use a document. Then we're going to have a query selector. And for the query selector, we're going to say that we would want to target the ID with the same name, message, and in. And since the message out is similar, we can just copy the line and just change this one out to out, message out. And also this ID is going to be out. So we're targeting also different ID. Now, obviously, as always, we need to add this add event listener in order to send this message. Now, maybe you know what, before we do this, let's go back to main CSS and add text transform capitalize over here. So all of them again, apart from this button, which we can do the same thing again. We can just copy this line over here, let's say. So we're just copying this line and adding the same thing to the button. So now everything is capitalized. So we're going to go back to script.js, and now let's add an event listener to the button. So again, send button, add event listener, then we're going to have a click. This is going to be the click event, and now we would want to send a message. So send message. Now over here within the send message, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done this. It's automatically for some reason. And over here we have this send message. Now obviously we need to create this callback function that's going to be executed only when we press the click event. Over here, now we have a function. So let's call this a function, send and message. Now over here, we're going to have, again, empty parentheses. But then we're going to say that there's going to be a variable that's going to get a message in value. So you see over here, we are targeting this message in. This is going to be our input box. And over here, we're also targeting message out. Now, I would want to collect the value of this message in. So let's say over here, if I write something, once I press it, I would want to collect this value. So how do I collect the value? First of all, let's create a variable and let's call this content. So this is going to be my variable. This is going to be equal to message in, or here, this my variable that is actually working with an input box. And we're just going to say value over here. And now let's do a console log. So let's do a log over here. And for the log, we're going to say content, just so we can see what we have so far. And again, let's do a inspect. We can maybe make it a little bit bigger. Over here, we can say console. And let's over here write like this. So once we say over here, you can see that we can get the value. So now it's the easy part. Since we already got the value, now I would want to pass that value. So again, we can over here just comment this out, this console log, and maybe we can close this one out, developer tools. And we can just say over here like this, that once we are passing the message, we would want message out over here, and we would say inner HTML. So what we're saying is, first, let's get the value from our input box, and then let's place the value in the message out. So again, let's do a content, and over here we have the content. Now, next, over here, once we have this, I also would want this input box to be empty value. So let's say if I write this and if I send the message, I don't want to go back over here and delete this, because you can see that right now it's working. We just passed the message. So over here, let's do a message in. So let's go back over here to the message in value where we're collecting from the input box, and let's set the value. And let's actually set the value to the empty over here. So what's happening over here is, as I type hello world, let's say over here world, then press to send, and now what I'm getting over here is hello world. However, this is empty. Now also I would want to avoid when somebody is just passing the message like this. So they're sending the empty value. So how do we do this? Well, we can create an if statement. An if statement that's going to check this content, and it's going to make sure if the content is empty, let's throw an alert box. So let's say over here if, and since we have a content, and if the content is equal to the empty value, then let's create a alert box. And let's say in the alert box what we would want to write. And let's just say over here, please, and enter valid value over here. Now, once we have this, obviously we also need to create an else. So let's create an else statement. And now in the else statement, we're basically gonna do what we did previously where we passed the message. So we check the value. If the value is empty, then we have the alert box. If the value is not empty, then we're actually gonna pass the message. So let's copy and paste this. Let's go back over here. Let's save it, and the moment I press to send, please enter a valid value. Now we can also maybe add over here current value is empty over here. And if we're gonna pass the message, so let's say pass this message, if everything is correct, we're gonna have pass this message over here. And as always, you can see that I misspelled it horribly, but I think this is gonna be good enough for this project. In this project, we're gonna create a counter that we can use to add count or lower the count. And if we're above 0, our numbers are gonna be in the green color. And if we're at 0, our number is gonna be white. And if we're actually below 0, our numbers are gonna be red. And we're also going to look at how we can create a little animation. So as you can see over here, that numbers are first invisible and then they eventually appear. So we're also going to look at how we can do this with a JavaScript. And as always, before we start coding, let's look at our initial setup. So we're going to have a folder. I'm going to name my folder counter. And again, this folder is going to have 3 files. Index.html, main CSS, script.js. However, this folder is also going to contain a background image for this project. So in general, again, you could just download the zip file and you can get the image, or you can actually place your own image, the one that you would actually like. So here, this folder is already in my text editor. And like I said, these are the files that we're going to be working on. And over here, this is going to be my image folder. Now again, I'm going to get rid of the sidebar and we're going to start working in our index.html. Now, first things first, let's create a div that's going to hold everything. So we're going to call this div a counter box. Now in the counter box, we're going to have a heading 1, and we're just going to say over here that this is going to be counter. Now, once we have this, once we have the heading 1, then we would want also another heading 1, which is going to have a class of counter. So we're going to say over here counter, and for this we're going to actually place a 0 over here. So this is going to be our counter. Now this is going to be our 0 that we're going to be counting. Then we're going to create a div over here that's going to have an ID of buttons. So I'm going to create a div. Then we're going to say over here that this is going to be a hashtag, and this is going to be BTNs. So now this is going to be our div. Now within the div, we're going to have a button. This is going to have a type of button, and also it's going to have a class, and we're going to give it a class of BTN. And after that, we're also going to give it an ID. Now for the ID, we're going to say lower count and BTN. Now let's write over here lower count, over here count, and let's go to the beginning of the line, and let's just actually copy this line. So now we have two buttons. Both of them are in the same class, except this is going to be not lower count, but let's say that we're going to say add count button, and we're going to say that this is going to be add count. Now this is going to be different ID and also different text. And that's going to be it for the HTML. Now we're ready to go to the main CSS and actually style this, just so we have it a little bit better looking. Now in the main CSS, first things first, let's again, as always, start with a body. Now for the body, let's do a min height. And again, let's do 100 view heights. And as always, you can choose something else, something smaller. However, I just like to use home my window whenever I'm working with something. Then we're going to say display flex. And those are the two properties we should already know. Align items center and justify content center also. That would place everything in the center of our window. And then let's do a background. So for the background, let's say that this is going to be URL, and over here we're going to place an image. So let's do a image. This is going to be our image folder, and then we're going to have our tech PNG. Now also what I would want is actually I would want to place it over here in the center. Then I would want to have a position. Now I'm going to write a shortcut, but let's actually first do a long version just so you understand what's happening. So first one, we're going to say background, and we're going to say position. So here we're going to have a background position. We're going to say center. Then after that, let's do a background, and we're going to say size. So size, we're going to say over here cover. So that means that we would want to place the image in the center. However, we would always want to span the whole image over here. So it's never going to be smaller than it needs to be. And then we have a background repeat, background, and we're going to say repeat, and we're going to say no repeat. And also we could add a background fixed. However, in our case, it's not going to make much sense. And like I said, we over here are writing in a long way. So if I'm going to comment this out, we can go back over here and we can do it like this. We can say that this is going to be a center, cover. Over here, just remember that you need to have this / in between them, and then we're going to say no repeat over here. So if we save it, we get the same thing. However, this would be a shortcut version how we can write this. Writing the same properties, but we need to remember that this is always comes first. Then we need to have / this would be background size, and then we have no repeat. Now obviously you can have different values over here, but I'm just placing the ones that actually make sense in our case. Now, once we're done with this, let's have a color for the whole body. Let's do color, and let's say white over here. So the color is going to be white. We're going to want a font family. Let's say Arial over here. Now, once we have this, then we would want to work with counter box. So let's say over here, counter, and we're going to say box over here. Now what we would want for the counter box, first let's do a width of a counter box. So again, we can use a flex property 0 0, and just for the sake of it, let's put like 70% because we always keep adding everything as a flex that is actually 80%. And now let's do a text align, and let's do center. So now everything goes back in the center in the box. Then we would want a border. So let's do a border. Let's say border is going to be, I don't know, 3 pixels, solid, let's say gray over here. So this is going to be our border. Then let's do a padding, 1 REMs over here. And then we're going to have a font weight. And let's say that font weight is going to be bold. And let's do a box shadow. Again, let's make it a shadow all around the box. Now for the actual box shadow, we're going to do a box shadow. And let's start with 3 pixels, 3 pixels. And let's do 10 pixels, 10 pixels. And then let's say black over here. And as you can see over here, that we have a bigger one over here on the right hand side and over here in the bottom. Now, as we're starting, right, if I'm just going to say over here 1 pixel and 1 pixel, now we have a 1 pixel, and then over here we have 10 pixel values. So obviously what changes is that whatever values we're choosing to use, and then over here we're choosing the color. So pretty much just feel free to maneuver with these numbers around and choose whatever box shadow you would actually want. Now over here, let's go back to, again, let's say 3 over here like this. And then let's go and actually work with the actual counter. Remember, we had this counter over here. And you know what, before we do that, let's do a text transform. And as also, let's make it a capitalize over here. And let's say that for the counter, we have a class of counter. And what I would want is for that 0 to be massive. So I'm going to say over here 6 REMs over here. So this is going to be our massive 0 over here. Now what I would want for the button. And since I have the class that targets both buttons, I can just say btn over here. Now I'm going to be affecting both of them. Now background color, what I would want. Let's say over here background, we can just write like this background. And let's do, I don't know, hashtag FFF. So this is going to be our background. Now also what I would want is border radius. And let's say 8 pixels over here. So this is going to be our border radius. Font size, 2 REMs over here. So our massive, our buttons are massive. Padding, not page break, padding, say 0.5 REMs. So this is going to be bigger padding. Margin, let's do margin 0.5 REMs, and then say 0.25 REMs. So top and bottom, I would want a bigger one, and left and right, I would want a smaller one. So this is going to be our paddings. Now let's do a border. So for the border, let's do 808 and 5E. So let's say over here, then this is going to be a hashtag. You know what? Just let's do black over here. Let's avoid over here this one. And let's say this is going to be 1. Sorry about this. Let me just get rid of this. I don't want to do a actual hex color. So let me do border, 3 pixels, solid, and you know what? Let's do F15025 over here. So this is going to be our border. Then we would also want, again, the box shadow. So let's do box shadow for this 0 pixels over here. And then let's do 5 pixels. And let's do a color of 00, 1, 2, 2, 1 over here. So now once you can see over here, now we have our little box shadow over here in the bottom. Then let's do a outline, and let's create that outline is none, because you can see over here I don't want this outline over here. So let's do over here, and this is going to be outline none over here. Now last, I would want a button active and button hover. So when I'm pressing the button, something should happen, and also when I'm hovering over the button. So let's start with button hover. So as I'm hovering, what should happen? Well, let's do a background color. Let's do hashtag 4CA, and then F50 over here. So this is going to be our background color. And then let's do color And let's say this is going to be white. So as I'm hovering, this is what I'm going to have from my button. Now also let's do the active one when we actually press the button. So let's say over here, btn and active over here. So for the btn active, button active, once we press, I would actually want to get rid of this box shadow. So I'm going to say box shadow, and we're going to say none. So here we're going to get this little effect. You can see as I'm pressing that my shadow disappears. So it looks that I'm actually pressing it over here. Now honestly, I can make it a bigger one. So let's say over here 10 pixels. And then once I press it over here, now it's not as good, right? It doesn't look like I'm actually moving the button. If I would really want to make this visual effect where I'm moving the button, you would need to actually translate this button down, right? But if with a small one, it still looks like as if we're actually pressing the button. So let's say over here again, you can see that it looks like we're pressing the button. Now once we have our CSS set up, let's go ahead and let's start working with our JavaScript. So we can save this and we can go to JavaScript. I'm not going to save this. And again, as always, first we would need to actually select all of them. So let's start over here, and this is going to be a let. And we're going to call this counter. So this is going to be a variable. And then we would want to select the counter. So we're going to go document. Then we're going to have a query selector. And since we're using query selector, I'm just going to say a counter. So we're selecting the counter. Then also we would want a const. This is going to be a variable. Add count. Now we're going to be selecting two buttons. So the first one is going to be add count. So document over here. And then we're going to have a query selector. Then for the query selector, we would want is a add count button and lower count button. So for this, what we're going to use is, since we have over there is two IDs. So we're going to say add count btn over here. And let's go and copy and paste this line. And this would be lower count. So not add count, lower count. And also we would want to change this one, lower count. And obviously, as always, they need to match. If we have lower count btn ID and ID add count btn, then they need to match as we're selecting them actually in JavaScript. Now, once we have selected both of them, let's do let count. And this is going to be our variable that we're going to set it equal to 0. So this is going to be our number that we're actually going to be using for our counting. And so far, we're just going to set it equal to 0. Now let's create two event listeners. And this is going to be for our two buttons. So first we'll have add count. We're going to have add event listener. Then this is going to be click event. And now we would need our callback function. So we're going to call this increment counter. This is going to be our first function. Now the other function is going to be decrement. So again, what we can do over here, we can just copy and paste the line. And over here, this is not going to be add count. We're going to call this lower count over here. And you can see over here that I would need a U over here, because that's going to make a little bit more sense if we have a count. So this would be add and not conat, but actually count. So let me just fix this, that it's actually going to make a little bit more sense. So I apologize for this. And we have lower and count, right? So now they should actually match. And this is not going to be increment. I'm going to say decrement. Now we have two functions and we have two buttons. So we're selecting two buttons. And obviously, if one button is going to be clicked, the counter is going to go up. And the other one, the counter is actually going to go down. Now over here, let's go back and let's say that we would want the first one, increment counter function. Now we also need to have a keyword. So I'm going to say function increment counter. And over here, we're going to say again, empty parentheses. And this is going to be our code block. Now here, first things first, how do we increment the count? Well, all we're going to do is we're going to say count. So we're getting this variable over here. I'm going to say plus over here. And then we're going to go back over here to the counter, and the inner HTML is going to be equal to this count. So we're going to say over here that this is going to be counter inner HTML, and this is going to be equal to what? Well, it's going to be equal to the count. So we're going to go back over here. If we're adding the count, you can see over here that we have our number that's actually going up. Now, obviously, we haven't set up a function decrement counter, so that's why this one is not working. So we can do the same thing, and we can just copy and paste this, because the only thing we're going to do is we're going to change it around the function name. So here we're going to say that this is going to be decrement counter. This is our second over here function, and let's do a negative one. We're not adding, we're actually going to be taking it off. Now, once I'm done with a function, this is actually not going to work, because over here you can see that I still misspelled it incorrectly. I have lower count. So if we're going to go back over here, now everything is working. So this is going to be negative. And now we have add count, which is going to be adding the count. Now also what I would want is I would want to change the color as I'm counting through the numbers. So how do we do this? Well, we're going to do this by actually using a if statement. So what we're going to say over here that we would want to change the numbers depending, the colors depending on what are the numbers. So for the increment counter, how we do that? Well, first what we're going to say is we're going to say like this: if over here, and we're going to say get counter HTML, inner HTML, and if this HTML is bigger over here than 0, then something should happen, and that something is going to be the actual color. So we're going to say counter style over here, style, and we're going to say color. Now for this color, we're going to say that the color is going to be hashtag over here, and 4CA, and F50 over here. So that's going to be the color if we're above 0. So if we're adding the color, you can see that we have the actual green color. However, we also have an option of if the actual counter is equal to 0. So we're going to write over here else if, and over here we're going to say counter and inner HTML, and we're going to say is actually equal to 0. So not bigger than 0, but is actually equal to 0. And what we would want then, we would want again counter style, and let's do color over here. Now this color, we're just going to say over here that this is going to be white. This is going to be simple color if we have the 0. So if it is 0, have it as a white. However, if we are adding up, this is going to be green. Now if I'm going to go down over here, now once again I will have a 0, this is going to be a white. Now I also would want something that if it is actually less than 0. So how do we do this? We're going to just copy and paste these two else and if statement. So we're going to go down over here, copy and paste them, and now we're going to say the opposite. We're going to say as we're decrement the counter, if this number over here is less than 0, then we're going to place a red color over here. So we can just write over here red. And if it is actually equal again to the 0, we're going to have a white. So now we have two options. As we're going up, this is going to be actually green. And if we're going down, now once we reach the 0 and once we get below 0, we're actually going to have a negative one. Now, also what I would want is now our functions are working. Everything is fine. However, we would want to add a little bit of CSS just so as we're clicking the number, it actually appears over time, not shows up right away. And for this, we can have a element animate. And over here, I'm just looking at a Mozilla developer docs, and just to show you what would be the syntax. So we have over here what would be the element. Then we can use the animate function. And over here, we're just going to write that this is going to be keyframes. And then we have options. Now, we're not going to be exploring every option that's out there. We're just going to look at a basic setup where we have our duration. And instead of iterations, we're just going to say that this is going to be fill. And fill mode is basically where you would want to stop. Would you want to go back to the previous setting where you started, or you would want to go to the actual setting where you finished? So I'm just showing you where I'm getting this animate function. Well, documentation on this animate function. Now, if I'm going to go back over here to our one, which is going to be counter and then 5. And if I'm going to go back to my function, what I'm going to say over here like this, I'm going to say I also would want to animate this counter. So I'm going to say counter because I want to select the counter. I'm going to say animate. Now in here, the syntax is the first we'll have a parentheses, then we'll have our keyframes. Now over here for the keyframes, what we're going to say over here, and even over here you can see that there's a suggestion. Now over here, what we're going to say, we're going to create two objects. Now the first object is going to be opacity. So I'm going to say over here opacity, and this opacity is going to be equal to 0.2. So what I'm saying is, as I click the button, the next number shouldn't be showing up right away. It actually should have opacity of 0.2 in the beginning. Now in the end, so if I have the array, the next object where I'm placing is going to be where I would want to end over here. I'm going to say over here opacity, and this opacity is going to be equal to 1.0. So this would be the end opacity. Now once I have my keyframes over here, right now when my array is done, I also can have another object over here. So over here I'm going to have an object, and this object is going to have options. Now for the options, we're going to have a duration. So this is going to be how long this actually takes, 500 over here. And also, like I said, the second one is going to be fill. And for the fill, we're going to say is once the animation is done, we would want to go to the state of where the animation finished, not where the animation started. So we wouldn't want this number to have 0.2 opacity, what we have over here. We would want the end state over here, and the end state would be 1. So here we're going to write fill, and this is going to be forwards. Now once we have written all this, then let's just check it out what we have. Since we added this to the increment counter, let's just check it out. So you can see over here that how the numbers appear over time, and if we're going down, you can see that they don't take any time, they show up right away. And obviously the same thing that we did over here to animate as we're incrementing, we can do the same thing as we're decrementing. So I'm going to go down over here, copy and paste, and now as I'm lowering the count, you can see that there's an animation that takes some amount of time, and as I'm going up, there's also animation. Now obviously if you want to see it better, let's say duration is now going to be 500 milliseconds. Let's say that this is going to be actually 1 second. Same over here, and let's check it out. What do we have? So lower the count, you can see that now it takes even longer, and if we want to go up, this actually takes less time over here. In this project, we're going to create a image slider with a JavaScript. So here we're going to have a container, and then we're just going to change the background images of the container as we are over here clicking the button. Now let's start with our basic setup. So the basic setup is going to be that we will have a folder. In my case, I'm going to call this slider, and I'm going to have it in the desktop. And in the folder, we're going to have index.html, main CSS, script.js. Now these are going to be empty over here. And over here, we'll have images. Now this is going to be for the background for the whole project, and these are going to be used for our sliders. Now you can obviously download the folder with all the images inside there, or you can actually create your own images. Now there's a reason though why I use these names with a 0 into the 4, and you'll see later on once we're working with the JavaScript why I did that. So if you're using your own images, I would suggest that you actually name them exactly the same way. And over here, once we are in our text editor, let's actually start working with a index.html. So for the index, what I would want is I would want a div that's going to have a class of images. Now within the images, we're going to place two buttons. So for the first one, we're just going to say over here type, and we're going to say type button. For the class, we're going to say class, and then we're going to say generic class, which is going to be button, and then we'll have another class of previous button. Now once we have this, we're going to go back over here, and we're just going to copy this line. So I'm going to say over here that there's going to be two buttons here. Now this one is not going to be previous button, we're going to call this next button. And we can also write within the buttons that this is going to be prev btn over here, save it, and then we'll have a next button. So this is going to be next btn. So 2 buttons over here. So what we're going to do with these buttons and with this images? Well, first let's go to CSS and let's actually style it. And first I would want to place that container with the images class actually in the center. So let's start with a body. Let's say we're here to the body, and we're going to say min height over here. Let's say 100 view heights. So this is my preference, always to have this window 100%. Then we're going to say display, and we're going to say flex. Then we're going to do align items in the center. So we're placing them vertically. And then we would want justify content, which is going to place it in the center horizontally. So now our container is sitting over here. And let's do right away a background for the whole image, for the whole project. Let's do URL, and this is going to be images folder and background image. Now, right away, let's do center. So we're going to place the image in the center. Cover, so we're always going to cover. And then let's do no repeat for the image. So now this is going to be our image. Now, once we're done with an image, let's work with images folder. So I'm sorry, not the images folder, images div. So for the images folder, first we can always start with the background just to see how it's going to look like. So let's do yellow, just so we can see what we're working on. See over here, this is going to be our images div. Now, first things first, let's do flex 0, 0. And let's say something like, I don't know, 80%. So this is going to be the width right now of our images div. Then let's do a height. So let's do a min height. For the min height, let's say 70 view heights. So we can do the same thing when we're doing, when we're working with the whole body. You can see the same thing we can do actually separately to our own div that we would want. And after that, let's do a background. And for the background, first, let's do a image. So over here, you can see that we used a background just so we can see what we're working with. But actually, let's place a URL. And again, this is going to be a quotation marks, images, and let's start with background 0. And again, let's do the same thing where we have a center, cover, and no repeat. Repeat over here. And you can see, as always, my bad spelling is coming back to haunt me. And now I actually have my image over here. Now, also, let's do a border radius, let's say 15 pixels over here. So once we have our border radius, then we also would want a box shadow. So let's say box shadow, and box shadow, first one is going to be vertical line. So let's say 5 pixels, and 10 pixels is going to be horizontal. And again, I'm just making them separate just so you can see what is happening and which one is which value. So here we're going to write black. So obviously the bigger one is going to be over here in the bottom. And then we have over here, which would be the 5 pixel one. So once we have our box shadow, last but not least, we need actually position relative. The reason why we need position relative, because I would want to place these buttons over here. Notice they're sitting over here right in the center, and also in the center over here like this. So you can see over here that right now they're sitting over here. And we're going to use absolute positioning for this to move these buttons all the way over here. So let's actually target the class that we had as btn, because both buttons have that class. And let's say over here that this is going to be display, and let's say inline block. Now after that, we would want a background, and let's say white for both buttons. Then we would want a color, we're gonna say that color is gonna be black. And let's do a border, and border is gonna be 3 pixels solid, and let's do just green color over here. So this is gonna be our border. Now let's do different font size, 1.5 REMs. So let's make the font size bigger. Let's make a padding bigger. So padding and 0.5 REMs. So this would be padding all around. And over here, you can see that I actually messed it up. Now you can see that I have a font size, and this is not going to be a colon. So now let's do a padding 0.5. Then let's do border radius, and we can use a 20%. So we're not limited to pixels. We can use a percentage values. And let's do box shadow. Next one, and this one would be 2 pixels and 3 pixels, or you know what, let's do 5 pixels, again black. So we're going to do the same thing over here. So this would be a horizontal, and then we have vertical. And last but not least, you know, we have this outline, this blue line, and let's just get rid of it. So here we're going to say outline, none. And once we get rid of the outline, after that, let's place them actually over here on each side. So for this, we're going to say first with a previous button. So first one would be previous button, prev btn. Now, since we have this position relative for the container that actually contains both of these buttons, what we can do is we can actually use the position absolute for the button. So I'm going to say position, and this is going to be absolute. And for now, you can see that both of them are here on the edge. Now, since I'm targeting the prev button btn, what I'm going to say that if this one has the position absolute, then I'm actually going to place it where it is. So top is going to be 50%. So what I'm saying over here, you can see I have my button from the top 50%, and then we're going to say that from the left is going to be 0. Now over here you can see that it is 0 anyway, but I'm just making sure that it is for sure 0. Now after that, you can see that it's still not where I want it to be, because the actual button itself has the values. So for this, we need to use a transform with the CSS. And what we're going to say is translate. And we're going to say translate both ways. We're going to say that we would want to translate negative 50% and negative 50% to the top. So we would want negative 50% left and right and negative 50% to the top bottom. So what I'm saying is I'm moving it 50% to the top from its own value and 50% left from its own value. And as you guessed, now if we have a previous button, we can make the same thing with the next button. So only thing that I'm going to do over here, I'm going to copy and paste this. And over here, we're going to say next button, because this was our class. But here we would need to change the values. From the top, it's going to be 50%. That's correct. However, here we're going to say right, and the right is going to be 0, because we would want it on the right-hand side. So we would move it over here. Now, we also would need to work with these values. You see over here that this button is not where it needs to be. However, if I'm going to change this to 50%, now I can see that I'm actually moving 50% to the right. However, I still moved 50% to the top because the button itself had the value. So once we place them in the center, there is 2 more things that I would want to do. First, I would want btn active. So as I'm pressing the button, something should happen. First, we're going to say background, let's say gray over here. So this is going to be our background. And then we'll do a box shadow that's going to be smaller. So let's say box shadow. And this is going to be 1 pixel, 1 pixel. And again, we're going to do gray. So this is going to be once the button is active, once we're actually clicking on it. You see over here, this is what we're doing. And let's do a hover one also. So btn hover, and background, let's do green over here, and color, let's say white. Let's say white color. So as I'm hovering, this is going to be green with a white color. However, as I press it, you can see that my box shadow is also changing. So once we're done with the CSS, now we would want to work actually with our JavaScript. Now for the JavaScript, what we would want is we would want to select all 2 buttons. So first we're going to start button. So next btn. And also we would want to select this images container. So here we're going to say document. Then we're going to say that this is going to be a query selector. So query selector. And for the query selector, we're going to say that this would be the selection of next btn, because this was the class for one of the buttons, and now we want the previous button, and prev btn, and also we would want for the container. So we're going to say const container and document. Then we're going to say a query selector, and over here this would be images. So this is the actual class that we have for our images. And over here I'm just going to add that this is going to be the container. Now once we have, let's do again the counter. So this is going to be our, again, value, how we're getting. And for now we're just going to say that this is 0. And for both buttons I would want to add a event listener. So next button, add event listener. Then we're going to say what event. This would be click event. And here we're going to say next slide. So this is going to be our function. Now again, I'm just going to copy and paste this. I'm going to say for the prev button, for previous button, I would want previous slide. And now what I would want is actually create these functions. Now let's do first a next slide. So first we have a function, then we have next slide. So for this next slide, I would want to create a actual function. Then this would be a code block. And over here, we're going to say like this. We're going to say first how we can change this. So we're going to say counter plus plus. So for the next slide, we're always going to be adding value to our counter over here. And now what I would want is actually I would want to change the actual value from my background. So I'm going to say over here container. Then I'm going to say style. And for the style, we're going to say that this is going to be a background image. So background image over here. And the background image is going to be equal to what? Well, the background image is going to be equal to the actual container and container value that we have. So if you notice over here, there's a reason why we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if I'm going to go back over here and if I'm going to say container, and then over here, this is going to be the actual background image for the container. I'm going to say over here that this is going to be the backticks. Then I'm going to say URL, and then we're going to write image. This is the folder that we're getting. Then we're going to say BCG, which would be the name of our images. And then now it's time actually to use the variables that we already learned. So we can use the counter variable. So as we're changing the counter, also the value of the image is going to be changing. So if I'm going to go back over here, you can see that as I'm clicking, I'm getting actually a new value over here, because the previous one, I'm updating the counter. And if I started from the 0, then this is going to be the image 4, image something. And if I just keep going up. However, the problem is at some point, you can see that I'm running out of images. You can see that nothing changed, because if you notice over here, I have 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4. However, once I get past the 5, because my counter is obviously going more than 5, because I just keep on adding, I'm running out of the images. So what I would need to do over here, I actually need to check what's happening. So first, before I do this counter over here plus plus, I'm going to create an if statement. And I'm going to say if counter is actually equal to 4, then change back the counter to -1. So I'm going to say over here counter is -1. So what's happening is I keep clicking, I get to the 4, then it changes back to -1, and I go back to the 0. And if we remember, the 0 was my first image over here. So let's try it out. And this should be the infinite loop right now, because it doesn't matter how far I go. The moment I get to 4, I go back to -1. And let's do the same thing with a prev slide. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to copy and paste this. And this is going to be our previous one. Now for the prev slide, we're also going to call this function prev slide. Now over here, since we are actually subtracting from the counter, we would need to change around this if statement. So in this case, we're going to say that if the counter is 0, so if we're going back all the way to the 0, then we would want to change this counter to the 5. And the reason for this, if the image last one is 4, I know that I'm going to change it back to the 5, and then I'm going to do counter -. So what's happening is now I can go backwards, and over here now I can go to the next image, and there's no point where I'm running out of images. Now, of course, in general, now we know how many images we have. In general, you would probably want to create an array that would hold the name of the images. So then you can use actually the array length. So it doesn't matter how many images you have. Now, in this case, we're using the fact that I know that I have these 5 images from 0 to 4. So obviously, these if values would also change if we would create an array for the background images. But the basic idea is like this. And last but not least, let's actually animate. So let's say we're here like this, that we would want counter, then we're going to want a animate. So this is going to be the function that we learned in our last project. And over here, we're going to say like this. We're going to say that we're going to start with an opacity. So first we're going to need to create 2 objects over here. Over here, this would be our starting position and ending position. So opacity and opacity. Opacity what? Opacity is going to be 0.1 over here. And the next one is actually going to be 1. So again, we're going to start with an image that has an opacity of 0.1, and then the opacity is going to be 1. So we're going to say opacity, again, equal to what? Equal to 1.0 over here. Now, once we have the opacity, next value is actually going to be actual duration. So how long we would want. So again, we're going to place a comma over here. Then we're going to place another object. And over here, we're going to say duration. And for the duration, let's do 1,000, which is going to be 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. Then we're going to actually place the comma over here. And we're going to say again, fill and forwards. So if we're starting with an opacity of 0.1, we would want to stay with opacity of 1. So we're going to save this over here. And for the next slide, you can see that right now we should be having our animation working. Now let me check what's not happening, because so far we don't have this animation. And the reason why it is not working, you can see over here that I didn't place my value in the object and the quotation marks. And not only that, I actually was trying to animate the counter, not the actual container. So what I need is container, and then we would need the animate. And also we would need to change this fill to forwards, where we have the value that needs to be in quotation marks. So if I'm going to save this, and as you can see over here, now we're animating actually our images. And if I'm going to go back over here, you can see that they're changing right away. So what we would need to do in this case, again, we're just going to grab this counter animate. We're going to copy and paste this, and we're going to go down over here to the previous slide and copy and paste it back over here. So now for both of the images, you can see that there's going to be animation as we're switching in between the images. In this basic JavaScript project, we're going to be creating a calculator. So here you can see that this is going to be our end result. So I can clear it over here, and then I can say, let's say over here 1 plus 9, and then I can click what would be the sum. And again, I can say, well, plus, I don't know, 45 over here, what would be the sum? Then times, I don't know, 90 over here, what would be the sum over here? And then I can clear it. As always, first let's look at our setup. So over here, this is going to be our folder. Then we're going to have index.html, main CSS, script.js over here. And once we're going to go to the text editor, this is going to be the file with a link to the main CSS. And over here, this is going to be the script.js. And first, what we would want is we would want to create a section over here. And for the section, we're going to say that this is going to be the class of calculator. So this is going to be calculator over here. Now within the section, first we're going to have a form. And for the action, we're just going to delete this. We don't need the action over here. And within the form, we're going to have a input. And then we're going to say that this is going to be input text. And within the input text, we're going to leave the name and ID just empty. And over here, we're going to say that this is going to be the class of screen over here. So the class of screen. Now, once we're done with the form, we also would want to create a div where we're going to hold all our buttons. So first, we're going to say that there's going to be a div over here with the buttons. And then we're going to start creating the buttons. So first, we're going to create a yellow button. So we're going to say over here yellow. And this would be a button over here. Then for the type, we're also going to say that this is going to be the button. And then we're going to have some classes. So the first one is going to be BTN class. And then we're going to have BTN yellow. So BTN yellow would be for the actual color. And then we need an attribute. So we're going to say over here data. And then we're going to say num. So this is going to be the attribute that we're going to be using. And we're going to set this one equal to, and this is going to be multiplying. And the reason why we're setting it equal to multiplying over here is because, as you can see over here, this is the first yellow button that we have over here. So we need 3 more: division, subtraction, and addition. So let's say over here that we would want to copy this line 3 times, and then we're just going to change some values. Over here, we're going to say plus over here. Then this is going to be a subtraction, and over here, this is going to be the division. And we're going to do the same thing over here: division, subtraction, and over here, this is going to be an addition. So these are going to be the yellow buttons. Now what we would want is the gray ones. See over here, now we continue actually with the gray buttons. So let's go back over here and let's just copy and paste a little bit. So here we're going to copy the first one over here, and then we're going to create a comment. We're going to say over here that this is going to be the gray buttons over here. And then we're going to change this one to the gray. And you know what, just to make it easier, let's just leave this one blank, because we're going to be copying and pasting quite a bit over here, because as you can see, we're going to start with a dot, and then we're going to go from 9 all the way over here to 0. So let's go ahead and let's actually copy and paste this 10 more times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hopefully this was correct. And we're going to start over here with a 9 all the way. Or you know what? No, this was the dot. So let's say over here, this is going to be the dot. Then we're going to say that this is going to be the 9 over here. Then this is going to be actually 10. Or you know what? No, this is going to be 8. This is going to be the 7. Then we're going to have 6, 5. This is going to be 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. And luckily, I didn't make a mistake over here. So we're going to go back 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 over here. So these would be our gray buttons. And the last but not least, we're going to have this equal sign over here. And this is going to be the clear sign. So here, we're going to create 2 buttons, but those are not going to have the BTN class. So we're just going to say over here that this is going to be the button. Again, type, and the type is going to be button. Then we're going to have a class. This is going to be BTN equal. So here we're going to say equal over here. And then we're also going to have BTN gray. So we're going to still keep the same color. And over here for this guy, we're going to say this is going to be the actual equal sign. Then we're going to copy and paste. And next one is going to be clear. So BTN, and over here we're going to say clear over here. Now once we have this, let's add a big C over here, and now we have our buttons, and over here this is going to be the calculator. Now once we're done with our HTML, let's go to the main CSS and actually style this. So we'll start over here by saying that all the items over here, we're going to have a margin of 0 and padding also of 0 over here. And plus, we're going to say for the box sizing, we're going to have a border box. So box sizing over here, we're going to say that this is going to be the border box. Now, once we're done with initial styles, then we're going to select for the whole body. And since we actually have only one child over here for the body, which is going to be section, we were going to be using a flex box. So here we're going to say that for the body, the min height is going to be 100 view heights over here. Then we're going to have a display of flex. Once we have the display of flex, now we would want to place that whole container in the center over here. So we're going to have align items, center. So this is going to be vertically. And then we're going to have justify content, center. This is going to be horizontally in the center. Then after that, we're going to have a calculator. So this is going to be targeting the actual div. And since we know that this is the only child over here, we're going to say this is going to be a flex 0, 0, and 95% over here like this. So we save it. And right now the actual div is actually 95% width over here. Now, once we are done with a actual container, Now we're going to deal with the screen. So for the screen, we're going to have a width. Width is going to be 100% over here. So this is going to be this input screen that we're dealing right now. Then we're going to say that font size over here is going to be actually 7 REM. So we're going to place a quite a bit font over here for this input. Then we're going to have a padding of 0.5 REMs. And also we would want a background. And let me do a proper background. And this is going to be RGB. And over here, we're going to have a 41, and over here, 56, over here like this. So this is going to be the color. And also we would want an actual color, and color is going to be white. And also we would want no border. So let's do border, none over here. So now we don't have the border over here on this input. Now, once we're done with the screen, now let's actually line up the buttons. So let me make more room over here. And we're just going to say that this is going to be a buttons. And now we're targeting this div over here. And as you can see, this one has way more children than the actual body, which had only one calculator. So here we're going to say that for the buttons, what we would want for this div. Again, we're going to say display flex. So this is going to be displayed as a flex box. Then we're going to say flex wrap and wrap. So once it gets not enough room, we would want the buttons to actually wrap. And then we're going to say that there's going to be a transition. And for this transition, we're going to say all. So for any kind of transition, we're going to say 0.5 seconds linear. So this is going to be one directional transition. And also what we would want for the buttons, we're going to say over here that for the button, we would want flex. So let's say over here for all the buttons. And now I can see I'm not selecting the class, I'm not selecting the ID, I'm actually selecting the element. So all the buttons, I'm going to say that all of them are going to be 0, 0, 25% over here. So now you can see that they're taking up this 95% that is for the whole container over here for the calculator. Now they're taking up 25% each. So now we have actually 4 rows over here like this. Now also we would want a border. I'm going to say border 1 pixel, solid and black over here. And then we'll have a padding. So we're going to say over here padding, and this is going to be 0.5 REMs, and this is going to be 0 also. So this is going to be our padding. And then we're also going to do a transition. This is going to be all, and we're going to say over here 2 seconds, and we're going to say ease over here. So this is going to be a little bit longer. And now let's do a hover effect. So we're going to have a button hover, and now we would want to add a background color. So I'm going to say over here background and blue over here. So as you can see that all the buttons, as I'm hovering over here, they're going to have this blue color over here. So once we have added a hover effect, now we're going to have some colors. So over here we're going to say BTN yellow, and for the BTN yellow we're going to have a background RGB, and over here we're going to say 245. Then this is going to be 146. And then we'll have a 62 over here like this. So 62 is going to be our background color. And then the actual color is going to be white over here. So these are going to be our yellow buttons. And once we have a BTN yellow, let's do a BTN gray. And by the way, I think I'm realizing that I misspelled it, but I think we're going to get over that. So over here, we're going to say BTN gray. And this is going to be a background. And over here, we're going to say RGB. And over here, this is going to be 224. Over here 224 and 224 over here. So these are going to be the colors over here for these gray buttons. Now also we would want to add a size and style these two over here, these 2 buttons. So here we're going to say that we would want for all the class of BTNs, then we'll want the class of BTN equal over here, and also we would want a BTN and clear. Now all these 3 classes. Now what we would want over here, we're going to say over here font size. This is going to be 4 REMs over here. So this is going to be the size of our buttons right now. And like I said, the last thing is going to be BTN equal. This class over here equal. And for this guy, we're going to say that there's going to be a background, and the background is going to be green over here like this. So now this button is going to be green. And last one is going to be BTN clear. And this guy is going to be a red. So background and red over here. So once we save this over here, now we're ready to go to JavaScript and actually start styling. So here we're going to be in script.js, and the first thing that we would want is actually select elements. So here first we're going to say const, and this is going to be for all the buttons. So here we're going to say btns, so this is going to stand for all the buttons. Then we're going to have document, then this is going to be query selector. So we're going to say over here that this is going to be query selector, and for this guy we're going to say query selector all. So we would want to select all of them. And over here we're going to say btn. So basically we're just dealing with the class of btn. Now next one is going to be the actual screen. So we're going to say const screen, and this is going to be again document, but this is just going to be a single query selector. So we're going to say over here, and this is going to be a query selector over here like this. And then for this guy we're going to say that this is going to be screen. So over here we would want to select the screen. Then we have two more. Now the first one is going to be const is going to be equal button. So here we're going to call this equal btn, and this is going to be again query selector with a button of clear. So document query selector, and over here let's write that this is going to be btn clear, or no, this one is equal over here. And now we need to just change it around. So let me select this. This is going to be clear btn, and this one is also going to be clear btn. So now we have 4 selected elements, and they are assigned to our variables. So we have btn, screen, btn equal, and clear equal. And the first thing that I would want to do is I would want to actually loop through all the btns over here, because you see what we're getting back over here is we can actually loop through. So what I'm going to say over here is like this. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to say for. This is going to be my for loop. I'm going to say let I is going to be actually equal to 0. Then we're going to have a semicolon. Then I'm going to say that loop until you actually reach the btns length. So stop before you get to the end. And over here we're going to say that this is going to be I++ over here. So whatever buttons I have over here selected, I would want to loop through them over here. This is what I'm saying with this statement, because obviously we know that arrays are going to be indexed, 0 indexed. So here we're just going to go through all the buttons that we have over here. And over here we're going to say btns. So each and every time I'm looping, I'm going to using this I over here, because obviously what I'm getting over here is array like. So this is going to be btns, and this is going to be an I. So here I'm going to say for all of them I would want to add an event listener over here, and this is going to be click event listener. Now what is going to be the actual function? Now we can write it actually outside, but I'm just going to keep it over here, an anonymous function, because there's not going to be much code. And over here we're going to say let number, and this number is going to be equal to what? We're going to say that this number is going to be btns, then we're going to say I. So we still continue working with this single button, whatever we're looping. So let's say we start with a 0, then we're going to be targeting a first button that is over here in our btns. Then the second time we're looping through, this is going to be already in btns1. So for all of them, what I would want is I would want to get that attribute. Remember when we added over here this date and num attribute? So this is what I'm trying to get. So I want to loop through them, and actually each and every time I would want to add, as I'm clicking, I would want to store this actually value somewhere. So I'm going to add this click event to all of them, and once I click them, I'm going to be storing that value. So here, if I'm going to say btns, then I'm going to say that this is going to be get an attribute, and over here I need to specify what kind of attribute. Well, we know that we have data, and this is going to be num attribute. So this is the attribute that we would want. So once I grab this attribute, now I can do actually something with it. Well, actually what I can do is, you see over here the screen. This is actually holding our value over here of the screen. So we're going to go back over here. We're going to say screen value. This is going to be the value for this input is going to be equal to what? Well, this is actually going to be equal to plus equal to number. So every time I'm going to click the button, I'm going to collect the data attribute that actually holds the value that I see over here, and then I'm going to add it over here. So this is what this loop is doing over here. So once I'm done with the loop, then I would want to add two things. So first one is going to be for the equal button, and then this is going to be for the clear button. So for the equal button, I'm going to say over here like this. I'm going to say equal button. Again, we're going to add an event listener. Then we're going to say that this is going to be a click event. And again, we're going to do a anonymous function over here. And in the function, what we're going to write, again, we're going to create a variable. We're going to call this variable a value. And over here, what we're going to say is like this. There's a function, eval, that actually evaluates in JavaScript. So here, what we're going to say is screen and value. So what I'm saying is, once I click this button, I would want to use this function to evaluate whatever I have over here on the screen. And then I'm going to say like this. I'm going to say that there's going to be a screen, and we're going to say value is value. So we're going to say over here screen value over here is equal to value over here like this. So once we save it, now we're going to be actually able to evaluate. Now after that, what we would want is actually add for the clear button. So we're going to say over here for the clear button, we're going to say again, add event listener. Again, this is going to be the click event. And once we have the click event, then we would have a function. And in the function, we're going to write that this is going to be screen value and clear. So we're going to say over here, screen value, and this is actually going to be equal to clear over here like this. So now once we save it, we can actually go to the big screen and test it out what we have. So this is going to be our recording. You can see that this was blank before. Now I refresh, and this is going to be my calculator. So once we have, let's say 1, you can see that now we're grabbing this data attribute and placing over here in this input. So this is what we were doing with this first one over here. Whenever we added to all the buttons to grab this get attribute, which would be data num, we set it equal to number, and then we just added this to whatever value we have over here for this input. And then once we click again plus, and then this is going to be 8. So now once I'm going to click this one over here, now this is going to be evaluating. So in this, actually add the listener, we had eval that was looking whatever the value is over here. And we were setting it equal over here to this value. And then we just said, you know what, if we're getting this value, we're just going to place it over here in the screen value. And the last one is very simple. We just cleared it. So we said for the clear button, whatever we have over here, we would just want to clear over here the screen. Well, everything else is working fine. We actually have 2 bugs over here. Well, the first one, you can see that I didn't select the correct class over here. So if this one was btn equal, and here I selected clear equal. So I need to go back over here, and I need to say that this is going to be btn clear. So now I need to select the proper button. And the second one over here is, you can see that if there is no value, and we just press over here equals, we get this undefined over here all across the screen. So if we do not want this, we can actually create an if statement. So we can say over here if, and then we're going to say again that if screen actual value is equal to empty. So we're going to say over here screen value, and we're going to say equal to empty. Then we're just going to have an alert, or else then we're actually going to run our function. So I'm going to say over here that this is going to be the else statement, and over here we're going to say alert. Now in alert, we're just going to say alert, and we're going to say input is empty. And over here, once we save it, and we're going to go to the actual bigger screen, you can see that once I refresh, I don't get this undefined. I just say input is empty. Now that lets the user actually know that we need to input some values. So here we're going to say 8 again plus, I don't know, 4 is going to be 12, and multiplied by 9 is going to be over here 108. And now we got ourselves a working JavaScript calculator. This JavaScript project, we're going to be creating a digital clock. As always, for the setup, I'm going to have over here the folder in the desktop, and then over here we have index and main CSS and script.js over here. And over here later on, we're going to be downloading the font, but we're actually going to do that once we start styling. And over here in my text editor, we're going to start with an index.html, and the index.html is actually going to be very short. We're just going to say over here div and an ID, and we're going to say that this is going to be the clock. So this is going to be my ID over here. Now once I have an ID, now we're just going to go to the main CSS and just apply some styles. So here we're going to say that for the body, we would want a minimum height, so body. So let's say over here min and height, and this is going to be 100 view heights over here. Now once we have the height, then we're going to say again display flex over here and justify content center. And then we're going to say align items also center over here. Now, once we have all this done, let's do a background. And the background, we're going to say over here that this is going to be hashtag 000 over here. Now, once we have over here this dark background, now let's actually apply the styles to the clock. So we're going to select again the ID, and over here we're going to say font family, and this is where we're going to go and actually get the font family. So we're going to go back to Google over here, and we'll see that we're going to be using this Orbitron fonts. So we're going to go to the Google fonts, then over here we're going to select this font over here, then they're going to give us a link where we should include it in our actual document. So we're going to go back over here. This is going to be our index.html. This is where we're going to be including the link. So we're going to copy and paste this over here, and then we're going to go back over here, and then we're going to have a font family. So for the font family, we're going to grab these two guys over here, and in the main CSS, we're just going to say over here that the clock is going to be equal to that. Now, obviously, there's nothing showing right now, so we're not going to be able to see it. But once we're actually going to add it with the JavaScript, then everything is going to be working. Then we're going to have a font size. This is going to be 5 rems over here. And then we're going to have a color. And the color we're going to be using is actually going to be hashtag 32. Then we're going to have CD. And then this is going to be 32 over here. And you can see that this is going to be this green color over here. So once we're done with HTML and CSS, let's actually go and start working on a clock over here. So the first one what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a function. And we're going to call this function show and time. So this is going to be our function. Now, once we have the function over here, then let's actually create a variable. And we're going to say that the variable is going to be let and date. And over here, this variable is going to be equal to a global object of a date object. So here, this is going to be equal to date. And what we need to remember is that once we have over here this global date object equal to our over here variable, then we can say that this is going to be another variable. Let's say let hours. This is going to be date and get hours over here. So we're going to be getting the hours. Now what we're going to be getting? Well, here we're going to be getting starting from 0 all the way to the 23. So this is going to be the numbers that we're getting. Then we're going to say let, and we're going to say minutes. And this is going to be date, and the same as with an hours, we're just going to say this is going to be in the minutes. Now in the minutes, we're going to say again what is going to be, what we're going to be getting. This is going to be 0 to 59 over here. And then we have one more, and this is going to be the seconds. So here we already know what we need to do. We're going to say seconds over here, and this is going to be, instead of get minutes, we're going to write over here that this is going to be get seconds. And again, this is going to be the value between 0 and 59. So now we have the actual hours, minutes, and seconds. Now, first, what I would want to do is I would actually want to format the hours over here. So let's say over here that we would want to format them. So how we would format them? First, we're going to say that there's going to be a variable. So we're going to say over here, let format hours over here. And this format hours is going to be actually equal to another function. So we're going to say over here, convert, over here, format over here. And we're going to pass this variable of hours over here. And now let's go ahead and let's actually create this convert format function. So here, this function, we're going to call it function. Then we're going to say convert and format over here. And then we're going to write that this is going to accept a argument of time. So this is going to be the actual hours that we're passing over here, but we're just going to make this a generic name right now for this actual argument. Now over here, we're going to say like this. So basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a values of AM or PM, which are going to be actually at the end over here of the clock. So if we're going to go back over here to our clock, what we're trying to get over here is this guy. So if it is past a certain time, then this is going to be PM. So basically, if it's going to be past 12 o'clock, then it's going to be PM. And if it's actually going to be less than that, then it's going to be AM. So this is what we're trying to create. And over here, we're going to say let format, and we're right away going to say that this is going to be AM. So by default, this is going to be AM. However, I'm going to check that if the actual hours is equal or more than 12, then this is actually going to be PM. So I'm going to say time equals over here and bigger or equals 12. And then we're going to say that the format is actually PM. So we're going to say that this variable is going to be equal to PM over here like this. So this is going to be the PM. And last, we're just going to say over here that this function is going to return this format for us. So over here, we're going to say this is going to be the format. So over here, you can see that now we're storing this variable over here. This variable stores this guy over here, whatever we're going to be getting over here. Because as you can see, once I open up over here this new date, now I'm getting instantly a time, because I'm getting get hours, get minutes, and get seconds. So obviously whatever I'm getting in these hours, I'm passing in this function, and I'm getting back either or. Either I'm getting back AM, or in this case, this is going to be the PM. Now, once we have formatted the time, there's another thing that we would need to fix. So if you remember, we were getting values between 0 and 23 for the hours. And actually, I would want to fix that. I would want to make sure that over here I have 9 over here, not if I would be having over here like 21. So we're going to go back over here and we're going to create another function. Now, before we do that, let's just set it equal to a variables. And we're going to say that this hours is going to be actually equal to the function that we're going to be creating. And the function we're going to be creating is going to be check over here time. And we're going to be passing the actual hours variable itself. So we're going to create a function. Then we're going to pass over here this hours variable. And whatever is going to return, we're going to set this hours variable equal to. So over here, we're going to go down and we're going to create a function. I'm going to say check time over here. Now over here, we're going to be passing, again, a generic argument. So we're just going to call this a time. And over here, we're going to say like this. We're going to say if time. So basically, if the hours are past 12. Well, what we would want to do? Well, first, we would want to say time. So whatever we have past 12, let's say 13. And this would be over here equal to time minus 12 over here. So I would actually subtract the 12 from the hours. So in that case, I'm not getting these 20 something numbers. I'm actually going to be getting these numbers, whether it's 0 or here 9 or something like that. So this is the first check that I would want to do. So if it's going to be past 12, actually I would want to subtract the 12, and then this is going to be equal to this time. Now also another thing that I would want to do, that if over here time is going to be equal to 0, and we know that time is going to be equal to 0 once it actually hits the midnight, we would actually want to set it to 12. So here we're going to say if it is equal to 0 over here like this, then this is going to be equal to time and equal to 12 over here. And the last thing that we want is, as always, return the time, because as you can see over here, we set it equal to this function. So here, this was a function expression. Whatever we're getting back, we actually need to pass in these hours over here. So we're going to say over here, return, and we're going to say time over here. So this is what we're getting over here as a variable. Now, the last thing that I would want is actually fix the fact that there is no zeros over here. So over here, you can see that we have the zeros. But normally what you would have is, if it is less than 10, you wouldn't see the 0 over here. So let's actually fix that also. So before we do that, let's actually say that there's going to be 3 of these variables. So again, we're going to start with an hours over here. And we're going to, again, set it equal to add 0 function that we're going to be creating ourselves. And over here, again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to grab whatever is over here in the hours. And what we need to remember that with the hours, we already converted it one time. You see over here, we grabbed an hours, then we passed it over here. Now we're getting this value already and passing over here. So all we want over here is add the 0. And the same thing we're going to do with the seconds and minutes. So here we're going to call this minutes, and this is going to be seconds. So let me just grab both of them over here like this, and we're going to say that this is going to be equal to minutes, and this guy is going to be equal to seconds. So we're going to go back over here and check this guy, and we're going to say seconds. So now what we have is 3 variables that we're actually going to be using and actually insert over here in our document. But what we're going to do is we're going to pass first through the function of add 0. So let's go down over here and let's create this function. So we're going to say function, and we're going to call this again add 0, and we're going to have a time Again, this is going to be generic, whatever we're passing through. And over here, again, we're going to say an if statement. So this is going to be if time is less over here than 10, then what should happen? Then we're going to say like this. Then we're going to say that the time is equal to, over here first, let's say that this is going to be 0. And then we're going to say the actual time. So if this is going to be less than 10, then we're going to say 0 plus 9, something like this. So we're going to have time over here. And the last thing, again, as always, we'll have to return. So here we're going to say return time over here like this. So now we're getting back over here these three values. Now the last thing, only thing we need to do is actually place it in our document. So what we're going to say over here is that this is going to be a document. Then we're going to say get element by ID. Now our ID is going to be clock. This is going to be our ID. And then we're going to say inner HTML. And for the inner HTML, we're going to use a template strings, because that way we can use the variables. So now what I'm going to say like this, I'm going to say that I would want to select first hours over here. I would want to select hours. Then I would want to select minutes. But before that, let's put a colon over here. Then we're going to have a minutes over here, minutes. And then the third variable and the fourth variable was a seconds and format hours. So again, another colon. Then this is going to be a seconds over here. And then the last one, we're going to say that this is going to be, again, $sign. And over here, this is going to be the format hours. This is where we're getting back this AM or PM. So we're going to go back over here and we're going to say format hours. Now, once we are done building this showtime function, now it would be a good time to actually call this function. Now, what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to go to the bottom of the document and I'm going to actually call this. But over here, what I would want is actually call this as a callback function. And I'm going to call this as a callback function in a set interval function. So this is going to be a built-in JavaScript function that's going to take two things. First, it's going to take a callback function, basically a function that has to be run. And the second argument is actually going to be a time interval in how often that function is run. So over here, this would be in milliseconds. So if I'm going to say over here that this is going to be 1,000, that means that this is going to be 1 second over here, because this is going to be 1,000 milliseconds. And over here, I'm going to say that this is going to be showtime function. So basically what I'm saying, I created this function that gets the new date, and then it actually transforms all these functions that we created. Then we insert over here in our document. And then I'm going to say over here like this, that I would want to run this function. However, not just run it once and show the numbers, but actually run each and every second within this set interval as a callback. So let me save this one over here. And now you can see that now I have my clock. And as you can see that each and every second is going over here. However, there is one thing where, let's say if you're going to refresh, you can see that for 1 second, you're not going to see anything, because it's going to take 1 second for this function actually to start run. So what I would want to do over here is I would just want to call this function first. So let's say this show time, we're just going to call it on our own over here like this. So I'm just going to say that we would want to call this function. Now, once you refresh, you can see that you have first the values and then your set interval starts running. So if we're going to go back and we're going to say to our recording, and if we're going to refresh, you can see that right away we have our clock. In this JavaScript project, we're going to be creating a menu. So over here you can see that we have a header, and then this would be a banner with an image background. And over here, if I click the button, you can see that right now I'm getting my menu items. However, if I'm going to go back over here and click it, you can see that it closes. And also with a JavaScript, we're going to be controlling over here how these bars move over here like this. Now let's look at our project setup. So over here you can see that we'll have a index.html, then we're going to have a main CSS, and this would be a script.js. However, we're also going to have image. This is going to be the header image, and over here this is going to be the logo that we're going to be using in the actual header. And also in the document, we're going to be using a font awesome. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a font awesome, but I'm just going to use a CDN. So I'm going to say font awesome. Then I'm just going to open up a web page. And once I'm in the website, we're just going to look at how to use and then we're going to use the SVG with JS, and then over here, like I said, we're just going to grab the CDN. So I'm just going to copy this one, then we're going to go back to our index HTML, and over here we have the links to main CSS and script JS, but over here what we're going to say is we're going to copy and paste, and now we're going to get our font awesome icons. So now that we're done with our setup, let's actually start placing our HTML. So here we're going to say that first we would want a nav. So I'm going to say over here like this, that this is going to be a element with a class of navbar over here. So this is going to be my element. Now within this navbar, what I would want is I would want a navbar header. So in the header, what's going to happen, let me just close this. We would want to place first a logo, and over here this button. So what we're going to say over here, that there is going to be a div with a class of navbar and 2 underscores, and we're going to call this a header. So this is going to be our div. Then over here we're going to say that there is going to be a image. Now this image is going to have a source, and over here we're going to say that this source is going to be image, and then we're going to say that this is going to be the logo. So this is where we would want to place the logo. Now once we have the logo, then we're going to add also a class. Now for this class, we're going to call this class a navbar, and again 2 underscores logo. So this is going to be the class. Now once we have our image over here, our navbar header, then also we would want to create a navbar button. So I'm going to say over here that there's going to be a div of navbar, again 2 underscores and btn. Now within this div, we're actually going to have 3 divs with 2 classes each. So there's going to be a div of bar, and there's also going to be the second class, but over here I'm just going to leave this blank for now. So I'm going to have bar, but now I'm going to say over here that this is going to be bar 1. So these are going to be 2 classes. And then I'm going to change over here that this is going to be bar 3, and this is actually going to be bar 2. And the reason why we're adding over here these classes is because you can see that they're going to have a different functionality. So this would be first, second, third, and you can see the second one disappears, and the first one and the third one perform some kind of action over here. So this would be over here our header. So once we're done actually with a header, now what I would want is have the links, because first we're going to place the header, and then we would want the links. So let's say over here, if this is going to be the header, let me create some room, and we're going to say over here that this is going to be UL, unword list, and we're going to call this navbar, and 2 underscores, again, we're going to have links. Now what are we going to have in the links? Well, first let's create a comment, and we're going to say that this is going to be single link over here, because we're going to have to create a li, and then over here we're going to have a link, and then within a link there's going to be a font awesome over here. So let me just close this window, and over here in the single link, what we're going to have is, like I said, li over here, and then within li we're going to place actually also a link. Now for the link, we're just going to have a hashtag. So this link is not going to go anywhere so far, but also it's going to have a class, and the class is going to be navbar. Then it's going to be 2 underscores single, and then we're going to have a link. So this is going to be our class. Now within the link, like I said, we're going to go over here, and we're going to have a font awesome over here. So you can see that I messed up a little bit. Now what I would want is I, then I'm going to say FAS, and then this is going to be FA home over here. Now I open up this font awesome. Now I can see that this is going to be my font awesome icon. Now once outside the font awesome, don't place it inside the font awesome. I'm going to write over here home. So you can see now this is going to be our link. And what we would want is we would want 4 other links like this. Well, 3 other links like this. So over here, we're going to say that we would want to copy this, and we're just going to say over here that this is going to be 1, 2, 3 over here. And let me just check whether this is correct over here. And let me save this and see this is going to be home. And here we have home, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So what we need to do right now is we need to change these values over here, because you can see that we have all of them home. So we can actually maybe use multiple cursors over here, because these are all the values that we're going to be changing over here. And we're just going to say that this is going to be home. And again, this is going to be home, home, home. And then we're going to delete also this guy and this guy. So we're just going to delete them. And then now we're going to say that this is going to be HTML, and then we're going to say HTML5. However, here we need to change from FAS to FAB. So now you can see that I have my HTML, and we're also going to write that this is going to be HTML. Now also let's do a CSS3. So this is going to be CSS, and this is going to be JS. So let's say JS, and outside we're also going to place JS. So now I can see that only thing I left to do is for me to change these B's over here. And once I have this guy over here, now we can save it, and now you can see that I have all of them. Now once I have the nav bar, now it would be a good time to actually place a header over here. So we need a header element. So we're going to have a header. And once we have the header element, we're actually done with a HTML and ready to go and start styling in the CSS. Now what I would want to style in the CSS. First, I'm going to start with the actual, as always, a all elements. So I'm going to say over here that this is going to be a margin 0. Then this is going to be a padding 0, also for all of them. And then we're also going to have a box sizing. And for the box sizing, we want to say border box. So this is going to be the rules that we want to apply for all of them. So let me just save this one over here. Now you can see that we don't have any paddings. Now after that, we would want to start with a navbar header, navbar, and we're going to say over here header. And don't worry that you cannot see this button over here. We need to add the actual colors. So here we're going to say header. Let me just make sure that I'm actually targeting the correct class, because I have been known to actually miss my classes. So here navbar, and this is going to be the header. So here what we're going to say is we would want a background. Now for the background, this is going to be hashtag 545454, here like this. Now you can see that I have my background. Then we're going to have a display of flex, and over here we're doing display of flex because I want to move them as far as I can from each other. And then we're going to have a justify content, and if we use the space between, this is where we're actually placing them in between. Again, we still need to create the actual button, so then we're going to be able to see better. And over here we're going to say a padding over here, and this is going to be 0.5 REMs. So this is going to be top bottom, and 1 REM off left and right. And then we're going to do a border, and let's say border bottom over here like this, border bottom 0.3 REMs, and solid. And now we would want to do a hashtag now 6. Then the next one is going to be BAA75 over here. Let's save it, and now we got ourselves a border. Once we have the border, let's start working with the button. So first of all, let's do a navbar over here and btn. So this is going to be our class. And over here we're going to say border, and for this border what I would want is 5 pixels solid, and again we're going to use the same color over here. So let me just grab this color and let me copy and paste this, save this, and sure enough, right now you can see that I have my button. Now what we don't see right now, but I already know that I'm going to have to do, is align self and center, because basically by the end of styling, this over here logo is going to be way bigger than this, but I want them to actually be lined up in the center. And then last, let's do a cursor, and let's say that this is going to be pointer. So as we're hovering, this is going to be the pointer. Now let's do the actual bars. So I'm going to say bar 1, bar, class of bar 2, bar 2, and the third one is going to be bar 3 over here like this. So this is going to be my class. So what I would want over here. Now actually I would want, first of all, a width. So I'm going to say 30 pixels over here. Then I would want a height. This is going to be 5 pixels. And then this is going to be margin 0.5 REMs over here. So this is going to be my bars. However, we cannot see them right now because we need to add the actual color again. So let's do again a background over here and copy and paste. And now we can actually see the bars. And then let's do a transition over here. And we're going to say this is going to be all 2 seconds ease. Now, what is the reasoning for this transition? See over here, once I'm going to click it, I'm actually going to be applying this transition. So whatever you're seeing that it takes over time, this is actually CSS transitioning. So that's why we're adding this transitioning over here. Now, once we're actually done with these bars, now let's start working with the links. So first of all, let's do a class of navbar, and this is going to be links. So this is going to be the links class. Over here, we're going to say first list style, and we'll have type, and we're going to say none over here. Then we also would want to do a transition. So we're going to say over here transition. Now this transition is going to be once we're clicking, you see over here how they're appearing, disappearing. Again, this is how this transition actually controls. And since we want them to actually take the same amount of time, so let me click it over here, and we would want over here, we're going to say like this. We're going to say transition, and over here we're going to say again all 2 seconds ease over here. So this is going to be our transitioning. Now, once we're actually styled in the navbar links, the next one is going to be navbar single link. So we're going to go over here, and we're going to say that this is going to be navbar, and single link over here. Now, once we have created a element, this is not a function. We actually need to place curly brackets, and then we're going to say like this. So now we're styling over here this one link. So first we're going to say display, and we would want display block over here. Then after that, we would want a background, and the background is going to be like this. We're going to say that this is going to be hashtag 697 and 47C over here. Let's save this over here. This is going to be the background for each and every link. Then we're going to have a padding all around 1 REMs. Then we'll have a font size. This is going to be 1.5 REMs over here like this. Then we're going to have a text decoration. We're going to say none. We don't want any decoration. Text transform. Let's do a text transform. And we're going to say that capitalize. So we're going to have this first letter uppercase. And then we'll have a color, the actual color. And the color, we're going to copy this green one over here. So we're going to go ahead, copy this, and copy and paste it. So now I have my color for the links. Then we're going to, again, have a transition. However, this transition is as I'm hovering over them. So this is nothing to do with the JavaScript. We're going to do a, again, transition. And we're going to have all, 1 second, and ease over here. And over here, again, let's do a cursor pointer over here. And now let's do actual hovering. So once we are done over here, let's say that this is going to be navbar, single link, hover. So as I'm hovering, what I would want is, first of all, padding left. So I'm going to make sure that I have actually padding left. And I'm also going to make sure that I have a different background. So let's say over here, and this is going to be padding left over here. And we're going to say that it's 1.5 REMs. And the point for this is, see over here, I have padding all around 1 REMs. So if I would want them to move as I'm hovering, I actually need to add a little bit more padding, let's say from the left. So that way they were going to be pushing to the right. So let's do it like over here like this. And then let's do a background. And again, we're going to do hashtag 5454 over here. Save it. Now check it out what happens. As I'm hovering, you can see that it changes the color and it actually moves a little bit to the right because we have pushed the padding to the left. And now let's do a header over here. And for the header, what we would want is actually have first a background. And for the background, we're going to say URL. And in the side the URL, what we would want is to find the actual image. So it's going to be images and header over here. And then we're going to save it. And we're not going to be actually able to see anything. And that is because we would need to add some height. So again, we're going to have a min height over here. But instead of just 100, what we're going to do is we're going to use the calc over here from CSS. Because I know that eventually this header over here is going to take up a 91.8 pixels. So I'm going to say right now like that this is going to be 100 view heights minus and whatever the height of the navbar. Well, since I already know that this is going to be 98.8 91.8 pixels, I can just do it over here like this. And you can see that I need to add a semicolon, otherwise it's not working. So now you can see that I have actually my image, and if I'm going to be able to close it down, then you'll see that it's going to be taking exactly the whole screen. So you see over here, since I know that once my navbar over here, when it's done, this is going to be 91.8, you can see that it's taking exactly whole the rest of the screen. Because if I would add over here 100, then there would be 91 pixels, and then I would scroll even down. So that's not what we want. We actually want to have 100 minus whatever we're going to have for the navbar. And then let's place a image in the center. So we're going to say center, cover, make sure that we cover, and make sure that we no repeat. Because if the image is too small, it might repeat horizontal direction. So let's do it like this. And now we're ready to jump to JavaScript and actually style it. So let's go to a JavaScript. And first we're going to have to create two variables over here like this. We're going to say that we would want variables. So first is going to be const, and we'll have a navbar btn. So this is going to be the button. And over here we're going to select document query selector. Query selector. In the query selector we're going to say that we would want navbar, and this was underscore underscore btn. So this was our button that we would want to select. And the next one is going to be navbar links. So we can copy and paste this. We can just say over here that this is going to be links, and over here this is going to be links. So we're going to write over here links. So these are going to be our two variables that we would want. Now basically what I'm saying over here like this, I'm selecting this button over here, and then I'm going to be working with the links. Now first, what I would want to do with a button, you see over here that I'm selecting the button. Now once I click it, I would want to toggle this menu over here. So let's go over here, and let's say there's going to be a navbar button, add event listener over here, and this is going to be the click event, and over here we're going to say function. So for the function, what we would want is first we're going to create a variable. So first we're going to check whether we have a class or we don't. So over here we're going to say let value over here, and this is going to be navbar links. So first we would want to select the links, whatever we links had over here, and we're going to say over here that this is going to be class list and navbar collapse. And over here we're going to say class list and contains. So we're looking whether this actual navbar links, do they contain the class or not? And there's actually two questions right now. First of all, what is navbar collapse over here? What is this class actually? And where we're looking whether this actually contains it or not. So let me save this over here. So this is going to be our class navbar collapse. And what we're going to do over here, we're going to go back to the main CSS. And we're actually going to change around a little bit over here. You see that I have over here my navbar links over here. I have the links. Now, by default, right away, they're showing over here. And that's actually not something that I would want. What I would want over here is I would want to go back over here to the links, and let me just place a comment just so we can see that we are adding this later. And then we're going to say over here that there's going to be height over here of 0 for these links over here like this. Now, first of all, you can see that once I added the 0, they are gone over here. And also I would want a overflow hidden over here. So once I save it, everything is gone. So first things first, we got rid of this navbar over. Now second one, let's create the class that we were talking about. Let's say navbar over here, and we're going to say collapse over here. And over here, what we're going to say is height, and we're just going to say this is going to be 240 pixels. And again, I already tested before what would be my height of the whole thing. That's how I know that this is going to be 250. Now you can use whatever value you prefer if you don't like this value. So now we have two things. First of all, we hid the actual links, and then we add over here this navbar class. Now let's go back to JavaScript, and now what we're saying is check whether the links actually have this navbar collapse class. Well, we know right now that in the index.html, they do not have it over here. And the reason why we're saying this navbar class list, because this is just going to be easier. If we're using this class list, then we can just check whether the classes that navbar links have, do they contain nav or collapse or not? Well, they don't. So now we can write over here in an if statement. Now I can basically say like this. We can say that if value is true, which we know that this is going to be false, but let's write over here if value, and now we have if and else. So here we're going to have else over here like this. And what we're saying is we would want first, if it is true, if it does have the navbar collapse, I would actually want to remove it because this is how we're going to be toggling. So I'm going to say over here navbar links. So this is going to be my variable. Then we're going to have class list, and then we're going to say over here remove. Now obviously this is kind of right now redundant because it actually there isn't there, but this is for actually toggling. So here we're going to say navbar collapse, and again make sure that we have these two underscores collapse over here. Now if it is exist, then we're actually removing. If it doesn't, then we're going to be adding. So we're going to grab over here and we're just going to copy and paste this. And over here, we're going to do over here that instead of remove, we're going to check if it does not exist. We're going to say over here add. So now what's going to happen is once I click it, you see over here, now my links appear. Now the problem over here that you can see that I misspelled over here in this class. So it's actually collapse. So now once I click it, everything is working fine because before that it wasn't working. So as you can see over here now, when I'm clicking, I'm actually toggling. Again, the reason why this takes 2 seconds is again back to the CSS over here because we had this transition over here for the navbar links, and now we're just basically toggling with this class. You see over here this navbar collapse. We're checking whether it has the class. If it has the class, then we're removing the class. If it does not have the class, we're actually adding the class. So this is how we get the actual navbar working. Now let's look at how we can work with these buttons. So let's say over here that we have the same thing. Again, we're going to be checking for the value over here, and then we're going to be adding a class or removing the class. However, in this case, since we see over here that we're going to be working over here with inside this nav button itself. So what we need is actually use the navbar button that we have over here. So we're going to say over here navbar btn, and then again we're going to do the same thing, class list, and if this is going to be true, which in the beginning this is not going to be true, we're just going to say over here remove, because the actual starting position for both of them is going to be exactly the same. So we know this is going to be false. So I'm going to say remove, and in this case we're going to create again a class, and we're going to call this class a change. And again, we're going to have to go to the CSS and actually create that class. But for now, let's have a change, and maybe let's add over here a remove. So if this was remove, let's add over here. And now let's go to the CSS and actually create this class over here. So if we're going to go back to the main CSS, I'm going to scroll up, you see the bars over here. Now let me go down over here, and what I'm going to say that I would want to create a class. The name of the class is going to be change, and then we'll see how it affects each and every bar. So first I'm going to say change. This is going to be my class. And then I'm going to say bar1. So what I'm saying is if this class exists with this button, then this is how it's going to affect over here this bar1. Now first of all, I'm going to say transform. So I would want to transform it, and then I'm going to say I would want to rotate. This is going to be negative 45 degrees over here, and then I would also want to translate. So first I'm rotating, and then I would want to translate. So here I'm going to say negative 10 pixels and then positive 10 pixels. So this would be for the bar1. Then what I can do over here is I can just copy and paste this, and you can see that I messed up a little bit. Let me just go back over here and select this, and over here let's do 1, 2. And now let's change for bar 3 and 2. So let's say over here that this is going to be bar number 2. This is going to be bar number 3. Now the difference for the bar number 2, what we would want is we would want to get rid of it. So we're going to say over here, very simple, we're going to say opacity, and we're going to say 0. So we're going to hide the second one. Once we apply this class to a parent navbar button, And the third one was going to change the values. We're going to say over here, not 45 degrees, rotate, and translating also, we're going to change the values. We're going to say -7 and -8 over here like this. So this is going to be -7, -8. Now, once we have created a class, again, what's going to happen is you can see over here, now we're applying this class. So what we need to understand is that by default, if we're going to go back over here to our document, and if we're going to go over here index.html, you can see that this does not have this links class over here. And also this navbar button doesn't have the class. However, we can create this class in the CSS. We can check it out how it would actually affect whatever HTML. And then using JavaScript, we can actually use this checking. We can check whether the element has the class, and then we can either add it or remove it. So let's say over here, if I'm going to go back, and if I'm going to say over here, inspect. So let me make this a little bit bigger. And let's get over here, Google Developer Tools, and we're going to have a elements. So you see over here, if we have a navbar, if I'm going to open this navbar up, you can see that we have a navbar links, and over here, this is going to be a navbar button. Now check it out what happens. Now, once we click it, this guy gets a change, and this way actually gets a navbar collapse. So this is how we get this actually done, and this is how we can create this menu using a JavaScript.